What happened? We will begin in 1 minute. I didn't do it yet. You're fine. Who's that? That's Mitch? No Maxwell?
Nice to meet you.
No, Maxwell.
Okay. Hi.
Yes.
Megan. Cool. Did you just swear her in?
She did earlier. Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. Hi, nice to meet you.
Above and beyond.
No, just my first meeting.
I wasn't sure.
What's that?
Why don't you get sworn in?
That's funny. Wait, one, right? Yeah. Okay, I would like to call this meeting to order on Tuesday, April 7th, 6:01. Traverse City Planning Commission. God, it's been so long since I've done this, I'm sorry. Planning Commission regular meeting. And I start with a land acknowledgement, go pull that up. Okay. The land on which we gather is the territory of the Ottawa and Chippewa peoples who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. Thank you for your strength and resilience in protecting this land and inspiring us to uphold our responsibilities to do the same. Roll call, please, Katie.
Chairperson Deturi,
Here.
Commissioner Hershey,
Here.
Commissioner Treadwell,
Here.
Commissioner O'Brien,
Present.
Commissioner McGillivary,
Here.
Commissioner Anderson,
Here.
Commissioner Swanson,
Here.
and Commissioner Holtree.
Here.
Ah, welcome.
Okay, announcements. Welcome. You're so fast. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to have for our announcements. Last night, the City Commission did approve the appointments for the 2 vacancies. So Michelle Reardon and Megan, last name again?
Holtree.
Holtree, thank you. We'll have your sign made shortly for the next meeting. So we're in the process of onboarding them. Today, Megan was able to go to the clerk's office, get officially sworn in, and so now she's joining us at the table. And you may notice Leslie, Deputy Planning Director, is not here today. She is attending a neighborhood meeting that is being held by the Airport Authority on behalf of the city. So she's taking on that. That's it.
Okay. Approval of minutes.
I make the motion to approve the minutes of the March 3rd, 2026 regular meeting as presented.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion and support. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
I
Great.
abstain. I wasn't there.
Oh, okay, thank you. Do you need a roll call for that or no?
You can, just in case.
Okay, we'll roll call that.
Chairperson Deturi,
Here, yes. Yay, sorry.
Chairperson Hershey,
Abstain.
abstain. Commissioner Hershey, Commissioner Treadwell,
Here. Yes.
Commissioner O'Brien,
Yes.
Commissioner McGillivary,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Swanson,
Yes.
Commissioner Holtree.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, old business. Item number 1 and only old business is the zoning ordinance rewrite work plan. We've talked about this for a little bit. We were setting the stage back in January, February even. I'm going to turn it over to Sean because this is his brainchild.
Yeah, thank you. So this was actually for the March 17th agenda, which got canceled. So happy to have this conversation now. No formal action at this time by the Planning Commission, just looking for some direction on the framework that we've been starting our work under. And to be honest, we haven't done much with it in the 2 weeks since that meeting got canceled because we didn't want to invest more staff time until we got confirmation or affirmation from the Planning Commission. So again, we are beginning to work on the draft. What we would like to do is restructure the draft by frequently coming throughout the next few months with the Planning Commission, getting feedback on the various topics that we come across as we begin structuring that, and then bringing to you a complete draft once finished. Leslie and I have both worked in consulting capacities doing this for communities, and we have found that that is the most effective way to review the draft, because when you are reviewing an ordinance, it has to be understood and implemented in its totality. And when we take a chapter-by-chapter approach, meaning we only bring one chapter at a time without the context of the whole ordinance, we have found that that creates a lot of confusion. So for instance, if we're talking about a commercial district standards and a question comes up about general landscaping that's in another chapter, without that chapter present to flip to reference, you can't feel comfortable that it's covered in the way that you need it to be covered. So that's the approach that we are hoping to present to you and see if you have support of. And again, it's not that we would be drafting it in a silo. We'd be coming and having working study sessions with the Planning Commission to inform that restructuring. And I say restructuring because the reality is probably 70–80% of the ordinance will remain as it is. It'll just be structured in a different format. Some of it's legally required by state law to be in there, such as the references to the airport overlay zones and things like that, or some other just simple policies that we have locally that apply uniquely to our community. So that's the first item, is just making sure everyone's comfortable with that approach. So I'll kind of run through the rest of this and then let you guys have your discussion on it and provide feedback. As we go through this, the primary objectives in rewriting the zoning ordinance is, one, to clean up the document. Just today, Dave and I found another set of inconsistencies within the HR district that are creating some confusion with an applicant who's working on a development plan. So we'd like to remove those inconsistencies and then structure the ordinance in a way to reduce the opportunity for inconsistencies in the future. One of the key ways to do that is not repeat things multiple times, but say it once, and if you need to reference again, point back to that section. The other way that we can achieve this is getting rid of the pyramid zoning, as we call it, that we use in our city, where everything that's allowed in C1 is allowed in C2 plus a few new things. And then all of that is allowed in C3 plus a few new things. So sometimes we end up carrying things to another district by virtue of how it's structured that may not be appropriate. What we would prefer to do is utilize a land use matrix, and I think we've provided that to you once before that Dave has made, where we have all the districts at the top, all the uses on the side. So if you want to know what's allowed in this district, you go to that district and you can see all the uses. Or if you have a specific use you want to do, you find that use and you can find all the allowable districts where that use could occur. We think this is a little cleaner way to do it, and then every district can be more properly right-sized with its land uses as opposed to just a more blanket approach that the pyramid scheme, or the pyramid zoning rather, produces. So in addition to that, we're obviously going to be working to align the zoning standards with the prescriptions in the master plan as required by law. One of the things we'd like to achieve is reducing the overall number of districts so that we have a more cohesive development pattern, especially along corridors. I know Commissioner Treadwell, you've brought this up before. I mean, you drive down East Front Munson and every couple lots, it's a new zoning district, so you don't get a uniform development pattern. It becomes much more patchwork. So we have some items on here we'd like to talk to you about to get some initial feedback on that aspect of district consolidation. The next is to create a user-friendly ordinance document that steps away from the legalese that a lot of zoning ordinances are written in. These are for everyday members of the public and community to understand as well. They're subjected to these land use subject to these land use regulations. So we want to make sure that it's in clear, understandable language. And then, of course, we can try to achieve that with the last bullet point the second half of that bullet point, incorporating more supporting graphics, images, tables, diagrams, things like that. Slowly over the last 10, 15 years, the ordinance has incorporated more diagrams into it to help support what the text is saying. We would like to do more of that to help support those that are potentially more of a visual learner than a textual learner. And then, of course, create a framework that is more easily administered by staff and the planning commissioners, that the standards are clear and concise and less vague and less open to interpretation. So I will pause at that point before I start getting into the establishment of districts and locations to see if there's any questions or feedback, not to get too much information on your plate.
Okay, Brian, then Jackie.
So you've talked about restructuring the ordinance. I assume you've got, either have done this before. We're not creating a new wheel. right? So can you provide us in the future some examples of how maybe a section of the ordinance may look restructured, and it could be somebody else's ordinance compared to kind of how ours goes forward?
Yeah.
Just so I have a better idea of handling that. My other questions, are you talking about establishing districts before uses instead of uses before districts?
So
Is
in
it
this
the
case,
chicken and the egg?
and that's the next thing that I'm going to talk about there. Our recommendation is first establish the districts, and what are the districts, and then what are the locations of those districts, and then going from there. And we have a high level understanding of what a commercial district is, a residential. But then once we figure out where they're going to be, then really right sizing the uses within that location. That's what we're recommending, but of course, it's up to the planning commission how you want to do that.
And the examples, Brian, I know we've received one in the, like, you've shown us one that was talking about, it was when we were talking about like building materials. Are you wanting more examples of the language or the graphics or both? Sorry, I might not be saying this well, but last year there was some sort of matrix that came up that kind of helped us envision what building materials, that's the example that pops to my mind, building materials for whatever kinds of properties. I just want to get a little more direction for them when they're looking for examples. Do you want like the
And what
language?
I'm looking for literally, I want to see how this new ordinance would be. Grab me a chapter of someone's ordinance that you were kind of
Got it.
modeling.
Like a Bel Air ordinance that you like that could,
I don't know if I like it or not. I just want
Yeah.
to see the difference.
Correct.
On
Okay.
how it's structured.
Yep.
So I can look back, get a better handle on where we're going forward. I don't doubt staff has done this and has an idea.
yeah.
I don't want to go have to search, and I don't want to read someone else's entire zoning ordinance, because it sounds like, while I agree with it, that like getting rid of the pyramiding also means the ordinance is going to be longer, because you're going to have to repeat the things that are, instead of doing the pyramid scheme, things that are allowed in C1, you're now going to state exactly what's allowed in C1. And I think that's good, because we've run into issues in amending ordinances before where we've made a change and didn't realize, oh, that changes what's going on in, we did it with, because all the uses are allowed in industrial, or C1
Yeah.
uses are allowed in industrial. And then we put something in C1 that we really don't want in industrial.
Yeah.
But we don't notice it at the time, or it gets missed. Because it's also allowed in C2. Maybe we caught it in C2, C3 in the transportation district, but we missed it in industrial.
The Royal U, I was using the Royal U, I meant like you as in staff, find them and, yeah.
So I have some examples that, I have a whole folder of examples, including ones that I've written for communities and others. So I have some queued up that I can send easily that might show you a couple different approaches. Like one, that community did want each district to list the uses. So to your point, it adds length to the document. Another community just wanted one centralized table for all the uses. So then they're not repeated in each district, but the
You
development
reference the
standards
table?
are in each district, but there's one table for the whole community per district. So I'll send those out to you all and get feedback. We can keep working on it if there's support for the table in general, and then we can sparse it or splice it into pieces for each district if you want to go that way, or leave it as one centralized table. So I'll send those out, and at the next meeting, we can have more discussion on that.
Jackie, sorry, Debbie,
Okay,
Jackie
sorry.
was
Thank
next
you.
up and then you.
So you're proposing kind of a more holistic review approach as opposed to a segmented, we're doing this chapter this week and the next chapter the next week and so forth. Do you have any guidance for us on what that may mean in terms of both the quantity and the cadence of review time that's going to be necessary from the commission, and maybe sort of an overall timeline that you have in mind?
From my experience having written these for communities, when given enough time, I can pretty much construct the draft in 4 to 5 months. But again, I don't know what PUD applications might be coming, what development applications that will pull me away from it from time to time, given my other roles within this position. So, and then honestly, when it comes to the review, that's really up to the planning commission. I've had communities do it in the course of 3 or 4 meetings, and I've had some take a year. You know, it depends where you're at. What we're hoping is by having a cadence, to your point, like hopefully our plan is to utilize the study sessions moving forward, more specifically for this, that we're getting enough feedback as we go through it that what is presented to you when the draft is compiled isn't that new. You know, like you've been part of the conversation leading to its creation. And we have found that that tends to make the overall review process quicker and smoother because it's not the first time the Planning Commission's wrestling with some of these ideas.
So I think what I heard you say is that we would be touching this and giving input for creation of the next draft, as well as feedback on the prior draft, maybe on a monthly basis at monthly study sessions?
Yeah, mostly at the study sessions is where we plan to utilize that time. And I think part of it is as we write it, we're going to hit crossroads where we need direction, and we're going to be taking note of those. And those are the things that we'll be bringing to the study session to say, like, hey, do you want to go this direction with this topic? Do you want to go to this one? We'll get the input. Of course, no decisions at that point are final. You can always change in the final review, but just to provide us direction so that we're working in the way that you want us to be heading. So.
Should we be prepared to give at least a cursory review of the entire draft zoning ordinance each month? Or will you be, highlighting sections that we should be really focusing on?
Well, once we get the draft complete, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm asking. I'm
Again,
really
the
not
goal
telling.
is
I'm really
utilizing
asking.
study sessions over the next few months as we're internally working on restructuring the draft and writing the information to get input on the decisions that need to be made as we're constructing it. Once we get that done, then we will present the Planning Commission with the entire draft as a whole, and then we'll start a more formal review process beginning on page 1 and going through it. So we'll typically outline, okay, so for this month's study session reviewing the draft, we're going to try to get through chapters 1 through 3, and we may or may not get through them all. If we get through them all, good, we're done for that month. We'll incorporate the edits that we heard the Planning Commission wants, and then the next month we'll go through the next section of chapters. There may be chapters, though, where we only get through one of the 3 that we plan to that month, and that's how this, the process goes sometimes, and then you just carry it over to the next month and keep working through it.
So
And
sort
it
of a
also
hybrid.
sounds like the before part, before we even get to that part, before they're ready for that part, if they run into, they'll provide us some examples. We could talk about that. Or if there's any the crossroads you were mentioning, that would come up. Like those kinds of things would come up before we get to that like starting point of, okay, we're now reviewing. Does that help?
Yeah,
At least
that
that's how
helps.
okay.
That helps. Thank you.
Debbie?
So on the last bullet about the easily administered standards, clearer standards, so going back to what Anna was talking about, the thing you presented us about building materials, that was incredibly helpful. So when we get to those things, would you be providing us with some options?
That would be the intent, yeah.
That would be great.
Yep. And even in the case like that chart for building materials, that represented that particular community's threshold of what
Right.
percent of a facade they'd be willing to accept. Those are numbers that are all open to you all to decide, or even material choices. You may want to add or remove some. So everything that we're going to be presenting to you all through this process is a starting point for you to give input on, then for us to modify in accordance based on what you share with us.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Jerry?
So this is just for clarification. So like I'm just looking at our current Muni Code website. So essentially at the end of this process, the whole Part 13 zoning code, Title II zoning code, in essence would be totally redone.
And I've worked with the attorney. We are going to keep the entirety of the zoning ordinance as Chapter 13, so it holds the same place in the overall code of ordinances for the city. So as opposed to a standalone ordinance that you might see in some communities, the numbering will seem a little weird, like why are we starting at Chapter 13.01? Well, that's just the structure within the city's codified
Yeah.
ordinances that we got to comply with.
I have one. I think, well, I don't know how to really phrase it, but as we're going, you'll probably figure out or find missing definitions or needing new definitions. I don't know what this group would like about that, but I really think that, I guess I don't know where I fall. I don't know if I'd want to do definitions like as they come up, or should we do definitions / index as its own thing? Like, I could see benefits of both. I guess I would ask the group, because we already know based on kind of how we've looked at this that I think a couple definitions are missing, or at a minimum, we'll need to add some.
So I'll share the approach
Yeah.
that I prefer to take on this. What you'll find if you support it is our definition section will probably be 3 to 4 times the length it is right now. Because definitions give you clarity. I like to have every single use defined, and we usually base it off of NAICS, the North American Industry Classification System that the Bureau of Labor Management, I think it is, BLM, puts this together, and it's very well defined, and it's a hierarchy of intensity from the 2-digit codes to the 3 to the 4 all the way on down, and it's a wealth of information for defining land uses and commercial operations and businesses for that matter. So we use that as a starting point. Just like right now, our ordinance reference the standard industrial labor classification. It's from
Classification
1987.
system.
That's what we're using for definitions. That's why you see things like VCR rental places
Yeah.
in our
Yeah,
zoning
right.
ordinance, which I think we can better capture
Yeah.
those land uses using more modern definitions.
Yeah.
But as someone who has to administer the zoning ordinance, I need definitions. Like, that's what we use to build our foundation on. And so I also, because of that, tend to put them at the back of the ordinance, just like a typical glossary, because it is thick. I know in legal ordinances, we tend to put definitions up front, but I think it just kind of fits better back there, and you can reference to it.
I like it at the
That's
end.
great.
That's what I want. I also am fine with it being much larger than it currently is, because I do really want to be, I want to be able to tell my brother who is building a home, you need to go look up that definition, and it's in this glossary. Like, because I won't know all of them all the time. So I'm really excited, I think, for removing the legalese and then having a functional document that people can just like go to a section. It's more clear. Then they go to an index if they don't understand the definition in the section. So
Thanks
So
for
I
telling
know
your brother
one
to
of
look up
them-
the definitions.
I think what you might have to worry about is reining me in sometimes for having
Okay.
too many definitions.
Okay.
Like, that's the
I
side
don't
that
think you can have
err
enough
on.
definitions.
But one thing that you'll see in a particular example, I'll try to highlight this in what I set out there. This is an ordinance that wasn't living on MuniCode, so it was in PDF. So what was nice about how we structured that one is in the land use table, every land use was linked. So if you clicked it, it automatically took you to that definition, so you could see right there, and then you can go back, And so that's kind of like the functionality for the ease of administration and use
Yeah.
of the public and us, and, putting in those links, like I mentioned earlier, instead of repeating things, point to it once and link to it. So it's like, if this use is subject to this standard, then click this link and you're gonna see that standard, and therefore, when we change it once, we know it's there.
Yeah.
So like, for instance, the example we found today was, previously, first floor uses in a lot of commercial districts had a minimum height of 15 feet. Prior to my time, the planning commission reduced that to 14 feet.
yeah, we did.
Today, we found a district that still says 15 feet, because again, we repeated it in every district, and it was one that was not caught,
Yeah.
So those are the type of errors or inconsistencies that we can be better at just through structure, frankly. So that's kind of the direction we're going there.
Very good.
All right, so then moving on, typically in this process, as we alluded to earlier in the discussion, one of the first steps is the establishment of districts and locations. Of course, this is heavily guided by the existing zoning districts and the future land use map in the master plan. Now, when you look at the future land use map, it's not that divergent from our current zoning today. Like, the areas that are zoned residential are still indicated as residential to, slight degrees and stuff like that. There is a little more nuance in some of the commercial districts. But what we would like to do is definitely get that dialed in with the planning commission early on. And I've been working with Jerry. We had a conversation today. His team is going to be working with us to develop a GIS mapping system where we have the city that we can pull up on the screen and have a conversation. We can present to you a starting point, such as a draft based on, again, the current zoning, the future land use map. And then we can go through and click and change the parcels in real time as the planning commission gives feedback. Like, actually, let's draw that boundary east of division, you know, and then we can go and change them real quick and work collaboratively and together to get it dialed in, because that's really the foundation is, you know, where the districts are and then what uses can go in them. So pulling from the master plan, there's some items related to that that we would like to get some feedback on tonight. And one, and this is again keeping with the objective of trying to reduce the overall number of districts, is we have 3 separate D districts in the city. Now, each one was created to address a unique position or location in the city, typically where we had a very large, impactful land use that was no longer operating. So the examples of our 3D are the depot, which was no longer a depot here on 8th Street, the Red Mill District on West Front Street, which was a lumber yard, I believe. Is that correct? Remember that, Brian? I'm looking at you.
That's before my
That was
time.
Yeah.
before your time. Okay, so the Red Mill District, which is over by where the Beta Station
Hall
is,
Street,
Hall Street
yeah.
area and stuff. That used to be a lumber yard there. And then the third one is the ironworks. So where Haggerty is today used to be an iron foundry. So again, these were districts that were created to address a unique situation in time in the city, but of course these lands have been redeveloped. One thing we would consider is combining those into a single D district, or possibly finding one of the commercial districts that could be incorporated into now. Now, one suggestion I would recommend is, given the locations of those districts, the standards that the Planning Commission established for the D2 along 8th Street is a really context-sensitive approach, and I think that is something that we should build off of. It takes into account changes to standards given proximity to residential, which is behind it, and stuff like that, and I think that's kind of the nuanced format that we'd like to move towards if you all support that. And again, everything tonight is a starting point and open for further discussion. So just please know, if you give direction today and we get further down this route and you want to see it go in a different direction, we can do that. But we just are looking how to start.
Mitch?
Yeah, to that point, the D districts did serve a purpose in time and having separate zoning for each of the 3, but now they have virtually no undeveloped or vacant land, so they're not development districts in the literal sense. I don't see a purpose in keeping a D designation specifically. I wouldn't say to, especially considering the sensitive nature of each of them, have uniform zoning for all, but I would be interested in seeing if they couldn't be, depending on what their built type is, rolled into R3, C2, and C4, depending on what's built there and what's the surrounding or adjacent zone districts.
Yeah, and I think the master plan supports that too, like especially along West Front where you have D3, I think the Red Mill one. It does talk about maybe considering that C4A, so
Yes.
it's a more of a continuation.
Which is right
higher-
across Hall Street.
Yep, higher design standards in C4 than there is in the D districts, as far as like the brick and stone materials, more glass facades. So noted, got what you're saying there. So the next one, and this was,
Anything else on D before Sean keeps moving? Yeah, Jackie.
yeah, thank you.
You could tell.
Yeah.
I just wanted to,
Thank you.
while we're on a topic, let's try to handle them bite size at a time.
I like the concept that Mitch put forward. If there were ever, a parcel of significant size that was identified for a specific development, call it Ironworks 2030, we would still have the option to create a D district, wouldn't we? If we
Yeah, so that's important, and thank you for bringing that up. All right. The zoning ordinance will always be amendable, both the text and the map. So whenever an opportunity comes out, the planning commission, through an affirmative vote by the city commission, can add a new district to address a specific issue. You could remove a district, it's always evolving. So yes, that opportunity exists, and I want to encourage you guys too. I've experienced this in some communities. It almost becomes that paralysis of analysis. They get so afraid that they're going to get one component wrong in their ordinance that they get hung up in the review and the adoption of it for a year or two. You're going to get some things wrong, right? We can't fully predict the future, and even with best intentions, until the ordinance is applied, we don't fully know the outcome of what those ordinances are. So just be reminded that you always have the opportunity to amend it. And my advice is always just observe and adapt, observe and adapt. So if you're seeing the outcomes aren't what you intended with those standards, let's have a conversation and amend it to ensure that we do get those outcomes. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mitch?
And just looking at the 3 largest parcels that aren't already public, already government-owned, and aren't swampland, you have the north parcel of NMC, which, yes, is technically government, but is undeveloped, or you have Cone Drive and Lear. And I can see any of those 3 getting redeveloped as something entirely new at some point, maybe not this year, maybe not in the next 10 years, but somewhere long time down the road. And frankly, I see a PUD as being an applicable tool for that case, because it is a large parcel. It would have considerations about nearby residential and how it fits in with the surrounding area, and you'd have to see what really works there.
Yeah, and that is a great option.
And they're all large enough in our existing PUD ordinance.
Yeah. So for those who may be paying attention and not as familiar, a PUD stands for Planned Unit Development, which is kind of a negotiated, agreed upon development plan for a specific location, almost creating a mini zoning ordinance for that project. And then as development occurs, it has to be consistent with that. An example is Morgan Farms, right? Morgan Farms is a PUD, and it exists as 3 phases. So it wasn't all built at once, but when we get applications for Morgan Farms, we pull out the PUD and review that as opposed to just the standard zoning ordinance, because those are the regulations that govern in that case. So yeah, that is a land development option in addition to creating a new zoning district that is always available through the state law. So moving on, the next one, C1 and C2. We've had these conversations a lot. C1 is proving, not just here in the city, but across the country, to be kind of a challenging district, and that is the office services district. As technology has evolved, people have worked from home or working from home more. The need for districts limited to only office space has been eroding, and communities are left with these districts with buildings that are hard to repurpose because there's really no other viable use in that zoning district. So one thing we discussed was combining the C1 and the C2. The exact dimensional standards and stuff will be a future discussion if we do move that way to combine them, because obviously being 2 districts, they have 2 sets of standards, so we got to figure out which way we want to lean or split the difference. And the other thing is that could free up one of the C designations, say C1, for a newly created type of commercial district. Specifically, if you look at the next bullet point, the master plan calls for creating a low-intensity commercial district that would provide neighborhood amenities. So we can think about some of those choice locations or where those would be better located. And this is in support of the master plan's concept of having like the 15-minute city. So being able to have access to day-to-day amenities within a 15-minute walk of your house. So that means where do these have to be located so that the opportunity exists. Of course, we can't force the development of neighborhood scale commercial, but we can provide that opportunity in proximity to where people live. And that will be a really interesting one to work with you through, when we've talked internally about some things, Leslie had some great ideas. She's like, maybe prohibit off-street parking so it doesn't become a regional auto-centric draw where people are coming. So it really truly is more of serving the neighborhood. Think Deering's, right? Like Deering's doesn't have a big parking lot. People walk there, they pull up on the street, grab what they need, and they go. Another thing to consider is if you're looking at incorporating these at all within the neighborhood, maybe at choice intersections or anything like that, maybe there's a requirement that at least one dwelling unit has to be incorporated within the commercial entity to keep the residential component. And since we know housing is such a vital need for our community and our region, that we're not losing land specifically for housing to non-housing uses. So therefore, you're still trying to strike a balance there. And again, a lot of these neighborhood scale commercial opportunities represent an opportunity to create a third place that we talk about in planning. So that third location that's not work, not home, where you gather and spend life, whether it's a coffee shop that you meet your friends at. Think of Central Perk on Friends, right? That was their third place where they gathered. And that is also supported by the strategic plan, which calls for more opportunities for social interaction. So providing those places where neighbors can get together if they want to meet, or after a walk, grab a coffee or something like that. Now I will say that is neighborhood scale commercial is challenging because the market is small that surrounds it, right? So everyone wants a neighborhood in or a bakery in their neighborhood, or on the edge of it. Most neighborhoods aren't of a scale to support a bakery in that location by the neighborhood alone. So we just got to kind of talk through some of this as we move forward. So moving on then.
Can we talk about
Yep.
Cs for a
Yeah,
couple
go ahead and
minutes?
stop me because I'm going to.
Okay, I'll keep stopping you.
Yep.
Jackie?
Could you talk us through the difference, the functional differences maybe, between our current C2, which is sort of a neighborhood center, and what you're envisioning as these neighborhood nodes, third places, gathering places? Is it just a matter of scale, or is it also types of uses?
I think it's both. Yeah, I think it's scaled, just like now C1 and C2 have a maximum building footprint, so that manages the scale in addition to height. So if we're talking about something even more neighborhood centric, because even though C2 is called neighborhood center, it's not really located near neighborhoods always. Sometimes it's on corridors and stuff like that. But if we are truly thinking more neighborhood center, I imagine it's going to be an even smaller scale, right, to fit the scale of the neighborhood's built environment. And then, of course, the land uses that we want to allow within there should be the ones that are supportive to day-to-day needs of the residents living around there, but also don't create affluent, if you will, but like nuisance that spills over. So we maybe want to consider not staying open super late, maybe not having uses that generate a lot of noise, or, maybe they don't allow live music. I don't know. Not trying to rain on loud music. That just, popped into my head. So that's what I'm kind of envisioning, if that makes sense.
Does,
Okay.
thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, this makes a lot of sense to me. You'll be next, Mitch. It makes a lot of sense to me because I think I was talking to you about this recently, actually, maybe within the last 6 months, was the property on Cass, where it used to be the eye doctor and the herbal shop. That is a perfect example, I think, of this, where it's got very particular uses. It really struggles to kind of fit in, and I think it's the perfect space where it's like dead set in a bunch of residential that you could do something there could be like a cute little community shop or a social thing there. That's immediately what I think of when I think of this, because otherwise we have C1, C2, C3, C4 that are very much catered to commercial adjacent to D districts or to a downtown, whereas we're trying to, I see the vision where we're trying to have one that is specifically maybe catered to integrating within residential. Yeah, Mitch.
Yeah, that's a property that I was specifically going to ask about, and in the vision of this, to use similar language, neighborhood scale commercial, is the vision to have that be existing commercial properties, or like that herb shop, properties that are currently zoned in our residential areas. Though that specific building has seen over a century of literally mixed residential and commercial use in the same building.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be something that we would look for guidance from the planning commission on.
And yeah, Deering's has existed in that location, which it's not allowed, hasn't been allowed for decades,
Yeah.
and it has no residential component.
Yeah.
Other places I can think of, some of them were grandfathered in, like the old Salvation Army on 11th Street,
Which
but
was a
then
grocery store at one point.
because it over the years had a decreasing intensity of commercial use, then it made it very difficult to have any commercial use going forward when the Salvation Army ultimately moved out of that location.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened to the building that was formerly the herb shop that Anna was talking about, because that went up for sale a couple of years ago.
Yes.
And we would get inquiries every week of things that frankly probably sound like good ideas for that building based on the existing building that was there, but the existing zoning prohibited it, because similarly, at one point, it was a credit union. We looked it up in the old Polk directory and like looked through its history. I think it even sold some cars there at one point, but due to its decreasing intensity and its non-conforming status, you couldn't really go back
Yeah.
up with any of those ideas. So it just kind of got to a point where it's like, yeah, I guess you can live there and maybe have an
Have a
at-home
side
office or
hustle,
something.
yeah.
And that's
That's
kind
what
of
it
what
is
it
now.
got limited to.
And then on the other side, you have throughout many of our neighborhoods, single-member law firms or architect firms or places like Slabtown Cookie Company, where it is a fully residential house. The owner lives in that house, and they have one or more rooms set aside for a commercial purpose, but it is not the primary purpose of that building on that property.
Yeah, and so that
But that
is-
sets a limit on, okay, you can have your home office, but you can't grow beyond that.
Yeah. And, you know, state law requires that we allow for home occupations, you know, which are very limited and stuff. But when I was at the state planning conference, or actually the national planning conference last year, I was listening to one of the planners from Ann Arbor, actually, and they have been implementing what are called accessory ACUs, accessory commercial units in their residential, where you, because most home occupations, when you look at zoning ordinances, don't allow any kind of retail or anything like that. It's more like getting your hair cut in someone's home or something like this. But their take was, you know, as expensive as land is, as expensive as construction is, why not let people in a regulated, limited fashion take a risk on starting a little business in their home or something like that. So we'd like to have that conversation with you guys, because whether you want to go that way or more this neighborhood center district, there's a couple different ways we could approach, you know, having more amenity-rich neighborhoods to serve the residents. So
That's what's important, yeah.
yeah, and that's ultimately what the objective is there, you know.
And I do see this as addressing a issue I saw in our master plan, that the master plan rose to my attention, but I didn't see it actually dealt with, which is we have the beautiful map of the walk score and we can try to improve it, but that's not just how easy it is to get around your neighborhood, but what amenities exist. And I live in Central Neighborhood, and it's not just the places like Deering's that are non-conforming but still exist as a place that I can go to, but how that fits in. But then you have newer neighborhoods, like your neighborhood or like the Baseville.
Only 70 years old.
Yes, but then it doesn't have any of that
Yeah.
historic commercial use that got grandfathered in, and you
Yeah,
just
all
have this
residential all the
one
time.
apothecary shop scattered in somebody's garage.
Yeah. Well, and that just
Which
shows,
means that, yeah, that whole area north of Munson Avenue doesn't have any coffee shop except for the college. It doesn't have basic offices that people could do any of their basic activities.
Yep. And I think you're talking about two different development patterns in the city, where central neighborhoods pre-World War II, where, you know, people walked most places, you know, and so amenities by necessity had to be close to where people lived and things like that. And then across the nation, after World War II, we started developing into more just Euclidean zoning, where it's like, no, just residential in this area, just commercial in this area. Things started becoming a little more auto-centric, and that's kind of where we are now. And we're like, you know what, maybe there's a
back.
benefit to going back a little bit and striking a balance between those two approaches.
So, okay, Jackie?
Can you educate me in terms of daycare as a use and where it fits into our current zoning and where it could potentially be enhanced in a zoning rewrite?
Yeah,
Good
so
question.
actually Lauren, the city attorney, and I sat down and looked through the ordinance at daycares, and well, let me back up. So there's different classes of childcare facilities regulated by LARA. So there's the family childcare, so that's in your home up to 6 kids. There's group childcare, which is in your home up to 12 kids. Then you get into childcare organizations, which are bigger and not in homes. And when we looked, I think every district allows all of them. And
Okay.
if I recall, because amendments had occurred before me, but like there used to be spacing requirements, like 1,000 feet between. Those have been removed already. So when Lauren,
Okay.
the city attorney, and I went through there, there's really no standards that are serving as barriers in the zoning ordinance. So those have since been removed. I think that the issue at hand now to address that is the financing of childcare. I mean, that's really having
There's
just
a
put a
limit.
child through
Incentivizing.
child
Yeah.
daycare. It's expensive. It's like, they want to keep the cost down for parents, but they also know they have to pay a certain wage to keep quality employees. And as a parent of a child in daycare, I appreciate having quality trained employees watching after our child. So I think there's work to be done on that. I don't know it's in the zoning ordinance. I don't think that's where the problems are today, but good question. Yeah, we did have that conversation.
So it sounds like there's an interest, at least on this, in the C1, C2, like, commercial, third place situation. So I think we're good to move to H's.
Yeah, so, and again, keeping with that spirit of collapsing districts, we talked internally, we don't really see why necessarily H1 and H2 need to be separated. I don't think when you're walking around over there, there's really any visible difference in development pattern. Be like, oh, this side of the street's H2 and this one's H1. The main exception being that I think it is H1 allows like the true hospital, which is the part that has Munson on it.
But that's not going to move.
And that's
Yeah.
not going to move, and I doubt another hospital is going to open up next door, I mean, if we're just being frank with it. So are we willing to let go of that differentiation in exchange for easier administration and more cohesive development pattern? And that's kind of where we landed at on that. And the next one as well, the NMC and the NMC C1 and C2. NMC 2, I think it is not just the main college campus, but also includes
University
the Haggerty
Center,
Center. And I think NMC 1 is the undeveloped parcel that they still have. So that is another one to consider, looking for feedback on. And even if we bring it to you as combined, you can tell us to separate them, and we can separate them and bring it back to you that way too.
But both Munson and NMC have their own existing district development plans.
Yep.
That they, as organizations, set on their own, and yes, it conforms with our zoning, but
Yeah, and that's a very good point. So
it also
if
handles
you're-
things like stormwater that we don't deal with as directly.
Correct. And so Munson and NMC, those districts, they're both required to have on file a master site facility plan. And that is something that is approved by the Planning Commission, so it's not like they just create it and then we abide by it. But when they come in and bring applications, like for instance, we met with an engineer working for Munson. They're getting ready to build another building with their prenatal wing or something like that. So anyhow, we had to get out that plan and make sure, okay, is that building in the location that was approved by the Planning Commission? And it is, and we follow that. So you guys still have that kind of control. And we have met with NMC, because within the last year or two, they updated their strategic plan. And we just told them, this would be a good time to update your master site facility plan so you don't hit a roadblock in your implementation moving forward. So we've been kind of working through some of that with them.
This makes a lot of sense to me. It's kind of a no-brainer. The Only time that we have really looked at H1, H2 in the time that I've been on here are two different times. Once when we were talking about, it was last year, I think we were talking about uses. And then before that, it was like 5 years, and it was hospitality homes or whatever. So those are the only two times they've come before us. I think and then NMC's never, since I've been here, I think, come up. So it makes a lot of sense to just collapse those. And yeah, it feels like a no-brainer. Jackie?
I agree.
Just to play devil's advocate, I'm more comfortable with collapsing areas that already have quite a bit of similarity in use patterns and ownership patterns and those kinds of things. When you're talking about NMC and you've got this sort of outlier of 55 acres of open land versus already fairly densely developed campus and Haggerty, I would want to look very carefully at, are we losing anything in terms of development options by collapsing them? Are we baking in some restrictions that maybe we could be more innovative in the uses if they were separate? I don't know. It's a hypothetical.
And
but,
it's a great point, and that's the type of, I think, analysis and questioning we're going to have to do as we go through this process, is weighing those
Of each one,
those
yeah.
options and like what do we gain, what do we lose as a community if we go one direction or the other.
and the hospital, I'm sorry.
No, you're
ahead.
you're good. Go ahead.
The hospital situation, we have H1 that is 95% owned by one entity, and then we have H2 that is a much more traditional neighborhood parcelized, small owners, small businesses. So their interests and their current development patterns are awfully different. And again, what are the risks and what are the benefits?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to hear that analysis.
All right, so that was kind of like some high-level things, so I appreciate the feedback that you've given us. That can help us start with the mapping. As we've started working through it, those were the questions that came to our mind. So this is like an example of how we hope this works. So we kind of work through, we bring questions for feedback to inform us, we kind of compile some more, we bring more back to you for feedback and direction, and keep trucking through it. The establishment of the allowed uses, I feel like we've hit that already. Are you guys comfortable with that? We talked about the land use matrix as opposed to the pyramid. And then, of course, once we have those districts kind of mapped out, then we can start talking like, well, does it make sense to keep that use allowed here if this district's going to be in that location adjacent to these type of uses and stuff? And so I think it's easier to right-size the uses within the district when you can see where the district is located. And so that's kind of what we're trying to achieve there.
I do, yes, and I see where Brian is also coming, where there could be instances where it's like chicken or the egg. So, but I think this makes the most sense, but there might be a couple when we're going through where it feels like,
Oh, we're going to hit some things that we'll spend a lot of
Definitely,
time on
yeah.
that we weren't expecting to have that much time on, because sometimes it's hard to crack certain nuts than others. So. All right, so then moving on, talking about dimensional and operational standards, we are, focusing on the master plan's call for the preservation of the neighborhoods. We're not trying to change over neighborhoods to something completely different. If anything, try to enrich the neighborhoods as the plan calls for. But having more of the enhancement and transformation-focused approach occurring along the corridors. And I feel like the strategic plan speaks to that, about our corridor development plan, our corridor master plan to help inform some of that. So here's a couple of considerations that I just wanted to run by you based on feedback that we've heard from the Planning Commission probably over the last year or two. We've heard at least one planning commissioner on a number of occasions express a desire to look into a reduction on side yard setbacks. So, and I think this was in reference to residential districts. So right now it's stated that the side yard setbacks are an aggregate of 14, but not less than 6. So basically the minimum you could get is 6 feet on one side, 8 on the other, or 7 and 7. We have heard some discussions on maybe just reducing it to 5 feet, just keeping it a simple 5. We have very narrow lots in most of our neighborhoods, only about 50 feet wide to begin with. A typical city lot, and then the platted parts are 50 by 165. So just if there's any initial feedback now on that, I will say by keeping both of them at 5 feet, and if it's the same for every property on either side, that keeps the building spaced 10 feet, which is where the building code is going to allow you to be without having to do a lot of fire prevention. Once you start getting buildings closer than that, you can't have windows on one side, you have to have different wall materials, but at 10 feet, you're fine. So I would not recommend in the residential neighborhoods going less than that necessarily. For that reason, it becomes a lot more complicated to construct, but if that is the will of the commission, of course, we can incorporate it.
Setbacks make sense
Yeah.
as somebody that is hearing from, again, a brother building a piece of property and having to juggle laying the lines and moving, like he had to move a couple things to accommodate those setbacks. And yeah, it makes sense. But you don't realize it until you see a real world example, I think. It took
5
that
feet
moment.
to your property line's not a lot of space.
Right.
So with 5 feet, if you want to put an air conditioner on the side of your house, you're going to basically, that's going to take up 3 feet. You cannot go, there's no access around it. The question becomes, then how do you get on it? And if somebody builds a fence on your property line, it's 5 feet from your house. And we have no fence restrictions in this place. So I can build a 10-foot tall fence outside, along my property line, and you basically are now looking at a wall for at least the first floor. I mean, technically, if you could probably get it up to the second floor too.
Yeah.
It's, so I like having the flexibility. I don't know if I'd agree with 5 feet. And, can we drop it down to, I just think 10 feet's very narrow between houses. I run into that issue already. Because I'm looking at an addition and putting in a air conditioning unit, and it basically, the option
Eats up
is,
that space.
if I do that, I can't go around the house that side. So I'm going to put it on the other side where the other one is, where I have 10 feet, where I can get around it. So you start running into these things and you start crowding them in, the question is how much footage are you gaining? And practically, I don't know if you get a lot of complaints about it. I'd consider it. But my first reaction to it is, I want to see why people are requesting smaller setbacks. And there are narrow lots, but what's narrow? So if you had a 50-foot lot, is that a narrow lot? Yeah, pretty much. So we have narrow, deep lots, we have smaller lots. We also have a front yard setback that's based on the average distance from the street to the house per face block.
And an alley setback.
Yeah, we have a 5-foot alley setback.
This is, yes.
20 feet per houses. Yeah. So, and that raises a good point, and we don't have to solve that all here now.
Right.
But I think, to your point, if there is a reduction, even by 1 foot in the side yard, because again, you can do 6 feet now, and what I had heard previously was 5. Maybe there's something in there that you have to maintain at least 3-foot clearance of passage, And to me, I go to firefighting, right? Can firefighters get around the building if it's on fire to fight the fire as needed? So that's kind of, ways we can do that. Fences, there might be an opportunity to talk. I will say, if we start requiring permitting for fences, my zoning administrator will probably retire 4 years earlier because it's a lot to manage. But although we don't have standards, the building code does. So like if you want to build a fence that exceeds 7 feet, you have to have it engineered, you have to have footings and stuff like that. But like just down the street from me, one of my neighbors is in a like 1912 house, so that was built right on the side property line. And the vacant lot next door got built, and she built an 8-foot fence, so now when they look out their window, about 1 foot out is just a wall of fence, you know, and that's unfortunate, you know, the rules allowed it, but maybe we can do better in those cases, I don't know, something to put a pin in for future discussion.
Oh, I don't want to get into the fence.
Thank you.
discussion.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah,
I'm just saying that it's out there.
Yeah.
And the question
Yeah.
becomes, you know, what are you looking at? And what are people call, you know, if someone starts building, if your house is 6 foot from the property line, and someone's building 5 feet from the property line, it becomes, oh, and then tell the contractors they can't go on your property line,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
you know, so stay off my property, or you're trespassing, and how do you enforce that? You know, next thing you know, because it's not gonna happen.
Mhm.
It's gonna be very difficult. It's very difficult with 6 feet, it's very difficult with 10 feet, as already. So, I don't know if it's, I don't know, again, I need to see people who are clamoring for 5-foot setback.
Jackie, then Mitch.
Just to offer personal experience of almost 20 years living on downslope, narrow lots with 5-foot setbacks, including construction of a next-door neighbor on a previously open lot. There, light pollution, noise pollution. I think one of the reasons that people out west maybe don't get to know their neighbors so much is because you know so much about them that you didn't want to know. So that one person's experience. And I was going to ask, has there ever been consideration for, I've been reading about Bigfoot laws, you know, rather than regulating for minimum dwelling size to regulate for maximum dwelling size. I mean, I think as a tool to moderate the use of McMansions and things like that. Is that ever
Yeah,
come up here?
so we regulate maximum building size in terms of
Footprints.
maximum height and footprint, so that determines the scale, volume, and mass of it. But it's always related to lot size. You know, it's usually, and the footprint is usually a percentage of lot size. Now, maybe there's a way to do a square footage. I think where it gets difficult with homes is, and you will typically see this in zoning ordinances across the country, is that the least intensive regulations are applied to single-family homes, right? It's someone's property, it's their home, the flexibility that comes with it. You know, we don't have the same design standards on homes that we would for downtown commercial buildings. And in this city particularly, the citizens passed a charter amendment saying, no, and you're not allowed to do that for 1 and 2 family homes for design standards. So we can't, because of our charter, regulate above what the state law allows us, which is things like the impervious surface area, the setbacks, the height, and stuff like that. So, yes, we had in October of '23 a study session at the Planning Commission where we looked at like maximum lot size.
Yeah.
That gets difficult to regulate too because the state law does allow you to combine lots. And we happened to look at one block in Slabtown where the lot width on that face block varied from 25 feet in width to 99 feet in width and every number in between. So it's like, what, in that case, what is the standard to base it off of? And the Planning Commission at that time was like, well, yeah, I can see where this is changed. So they decided not to do anything with that. If like a maximum lot size is something that the city commission or the planning commission is interested in, I would need to talk with the city attorney more about some of the challenges that I just mentioned. You know, we don't want to be in conflict with state law.
Yeah.
I
You
guess,
bet.
you know, so.
Mitch?
Yeah.
Looking at the zoning changes that were passed in 2023, which allowed various aspects of increased density, changed some of our setbacks and some intensity of residential building. We haven't seen a whole lot of permits for those, but we have seen some. If there's a change in side yard setbacks down to, say, 5 feet, I don't expect there would be a flood of new construction. What I do see is the potential for somebody that's been wanting to put an addition on their house, but there's not quite enough room to make that work, and now there would be. And if they're building it, then they've already made the decision of how much space they want alongside the house. And also, we do have dozens of existing houses on relatively narrow lots that do have relatively narrow setbacks because they weren't built to our modern standards. And that could allow more flexibility for renovations and reconstruction without changing the external building footprint.
Yep, I would agree. So definitely more to explore as we go through this. So that's, I see that as one that we will work through once we get the districts and uses established and start talking about dimensional standards. So the next one is just high level about parking. So in 2021, the Planning Commission recommended and the City Commission approved the elimination of all parking requirements for residential uses. Just, I think last year we were having a conversation and it was apparent that some planning commissioners thought that, drawing back on memory, that all parking requirements had gotten removed.
Yeah.
So at this point, I just thought we'd pose the question, do you guys want to keep maintaining a minimum parking requirement, or do you want to, again, we haven't had any downtown either for 40 years, So if you don't have to necessarily answer now, but if anyone has some insights that they'd like to share to provide direction, we'd be happy to hear it.
As someone that was one of the people that forgot about this, I'm interested. Shay, go ahead.
I was just going to say, this is something that's been on my mind for a long time, but also I think we should keep in mind that like banks don't always finance projects unless they have parking.
100%.
So we can get rid of the minimums, but
Towing a line.
yeah, how, is that going to create more work for staff? Okay.
No, not, if we get rid of the minimums, it won't, and
Is
we've
it going to
seen
create
that.
more work for me?
My goal is no there. But no, you're right. We know financing for many lending institutions requires a certain amount of parking. And even for our affordable housing, most of the time, MISHDA requires a 1-for-1, meaning one parking spot per dwelling unit. So even though we may not require it, there may be other requirements in the background. And, I think our bigger fear sometimes is overparking some places. And I will say developments, partially because our land values have gone up and up and up, it's hard to justify using that much of the land just for parking. But I remember in another township I was working in, there was a bank with 8 parking spaces, and they wanted to move to a new location, and part of their presentation was how everything is automated now. Everything's done online. People don't come into the bank like they used to. If they do, we have computers here for them to do their banking. But our new bank, we need 50 parking spots for. So it was like, okay, wait a minute, I'm not understanding the direction here. So sometimes maybe instead of a parking minimum, I've seen communities move to a parking maximum. But that's up to you all when we get into that level of detail. But yeah, if there's any more thoughts on parking in general now, if you want to see it more strictly mandated, or flexible, not mandated, we'll take that input.
Mitch?
Yeah, at baseline, I'd be fine with removing any parking requirements that we have on our books, just to allow more flexibility, knowing that that won't remove parking. Parking will still get built because developers, both residential and commercial, see value to that, and most of our parcels in the city, both residential and commercial, already have parking, so. But yeah, to the point of both banks, MISHDA, if there's federal or other grant sources, they may look to parking as something that they require. And something that I'd like to see, though it's not something we can deal with on the city side, is encouraging community or shared parking, because very often, especially along a commercial corridor, you have multiple parcels, each with their own parking, but they have non-overlapping peak times. So if somebody can park in the parking lot at the business next door or 2 doors down, that's available.
Yeah.
We've run into this situation, we being the Housing Commission, we have Riverview Terrace, in 150 Pine that has 43 spots for 115 units, so very below 1 for 1, and that covers all parking for residents, for staff, for deliveries. And it works. But when we tried to move that to East 8th Street, the old Tebow Florist, where we have 28 spaces for 44 units, that's not as severe a ratio, but for that, we found that we are running into a shortage of, maybe we should have had 5 more spaces. And not that there isn't parking in the surrounding area, but then after the fact, it is harder to talk to, okay, church or dentist's office or whoever, can we have some use of your parking area?
Yeah, and I can't think in the 5 years I've been here, a single commercial development outside of downtown that didn't include parking, you know? I think part of the reality is we aren't really a dense city, you know? And so when we think of our commercial businesses, the market footprint that they need to be supported is largely bigger than a walkable radius. And so they depend. I mean, you talk to the businesses downtown, you know, they have customers coming from Kalkaska and Glen Arbor. So there's always going to be a need for parking to help support the businesses by the market that needs to come into town to take advantage of those. So I don't think we're going to see parking go away if it's required because of the reasons you all have mentioned, the one we're just talking about there. I think where minimum parking requirements become challenging, I'll give you one example. When I started was Loco Boys, which is on West Front Street. The adaptive reuse of existing buildings, that was their biggest barrier, is the parcel's parking lot didn't have enough parking to meet the zoning minimum requirement based on the square footage for that land use. So I was able to work with them because the code allows us to establish a lower minimum based on the fact that they're in a walkable neighborhood, they were on the Bay Line, which is a free bus, there's a bike lane right out there, there is on-street parking available, so we were able to incorporate that. But even still, we had to limit the number of seating, even though the fire code capacity allowed more, just because parking requirements are tied to seats in a restaurant. But we did say if you could get permission from the building next door, which again has opposite hours, it's a medical supply company, they're open during the day, they're open at night, then we would let you add more tables if you could show us a parking agreement or lease that you had with them for that. They haven't been back, so I don't know that they're in pursuit of that, but that's ways that we've tried to work within the code, but an example of how it can create a barrier to activating a new use in an existing building. If the lot, if it wasn't developed to meet those zoning parking requirements now, it can be a challenge. All right.
Heights?
Yeah, the last thing is just a general feedback on heights right now. You know, we have districts that go up to 100 feet. They require a special land use permit above 60. There was a charter amendment in 2016, so buildings over 60 feet need to go to a vote of the people. So, you know, we haven't really seen a lot of that. I mean, just because waiting 9 months for an unpredictable outcome, not based on any standards, is not usually a path that most developers would follow. But since we lost all that elevated development potential within the city in those allowed districts, is there an interest in balancing it by taking some of the districts that are potentially 45 feet and bumping them up to 60? Now, I bring this to light with the car wash that you guys are currently working on, right? Like, we sat with developers, and that's a district that's 45 feet. One in particular, he was going to build 2 apartment buildings on there with first floor commercial, but at 45 feet, he's like, I can't get it to pencil out. So we told them you could apply for either conditional rezoning or something, but they decided to walk away from it. But, you know, I guess that's one of those trade-off questions. You know, are you willing to support a higher height if it achieve some of your land use goals, such as housing, and we have precedent for that in, say, C2, right? It's 30 feet, but you can go 45 feet if residential is included. You could do something like that. But the reality is, some of those land uses that we need the most, such as housing, generate the least amount of revenue, and so they're hard to pencil out, and that's why a lot of times you end up seeing other uses come in that can generate the revenue at a lower elevation, such as a car wash, which I think you all got the sense that that is not super desirable at that location. So those are the trade-offs that the Planning Commission might need to think about. And again, I'm throwing this all at you now. This is going to be a prolonged process. Nothing needs to be carved in stone, but if anyone wants to share their thoughts on that at this time, it might help inform us as we move forward.
I'm interested. It makes a lot of sense. I'm in a 60-foot building. They can get more creative. They can have shared rooftop space. That's what we have, and it's amazing. Most of the time, we're probably going to see this on a corridor. Like, I could see this happening on 14th. Like, wouldn't that be a missed opportunity if we didn't have that? Like, if those, that strip of outlets ever changes, like, and it's butting up against, like, that, like, I think it's probably the playground. I think it's the school playground. Like, that's a missed opportunity. That could have floors of residential with commercial. So I'm interested. It makes sense.
I'm definitely interested in exploring that.
Exploring, okay. So similar to that, and I don't think
Oh, sorry, Jerry.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful for that discussion to, especially with some of the newer developments, like, I don't know if it's something that can just be pictures or just like what's common good or common ground, what's the bank, what's Forefront, what is Park Place, what is Indigo, just so, because I swear, as much as we've talked about 60 feet, it's still always, I wouldn't have thought Anna's building was 60 feet, but I guess it is now that I think about it. So anyway, just a visual, if we go down that route of just seeing what these, so we can reference them.
I think I'm hearing walking tour.
Oh, I love a walking tour.
I was thinking we take some of the 45-foot buildings and we put Lego walls around the top so we can get a visual.
Yeah.
16 feet tall.
Well, and I think
Probably
with,
like for maybe foam blocks.
man, I haven't done this in like 15
Yep.
years, but there is ways to Photoshop to scale to show like changes in mass and stuff
On
like
top
that.
of,
If only I
yeah.
had a graphic
Yeah, the picture
designer on
doesn't really
staff. No. So you mentioned Common Ground or Common Good.
Sorry.
Grounds.
Grounds.
Common
Gosh,
Ground.
so many on
So
the same
many
street.
terms. So does
It's so
Bakery.
confusing
Yeah.
for me. So we talk about that one a lot because when you stand at the street level in front of those two buildings, they feel like they have the same mass. Where West Shore Bank is 45 feet, Common Ground is 60 feet, but because of those D2 development regulations that I referenced earlier that the Planning Commission worked on, above 45 feet, the building steps back. So you don't feel that mass at street level, but the volume does exist above 45. So we could go and look at some of those and
I do actually take it back. I think mine is closer to that. I think it was a step back for the parapets at the top. It's not 60.
I think it's 60 to the top of the community room and 45 to the top
Oh,
of
okay,
the
okay.
residential.
Okay.
I think. I could be wrong on that.
I think you're right. I don't know. I
Um,
shouldn't be talking
Again, that
about
was
it.
one of those kind of
But it's a
convoluted
nice building.
conditional rezoning things at the time that got us there.
It would be on the walking tour.
For sure.
Yep. All right, and so on that topic of building height, and I didn't put this in the bullet point, but I'll bring it up now, it's related, is I have heard from some planning commissioners interest in exploring a minimum of 2 stories along some of our key corridors. As I've heard some planning commissioners specifically state that they're looking for intentionality of how these limited pieces of land are developed to meet our needs. You know, I heard this come up again in reference to the car wash. You know, if there's a minimum 2-story standard, that alone may take care of some of the less desirable uses that you want in that district that may be allowed. So any thoughts you have on that, I'd be happy to hear as well. And we can revisit any of these too as you ruminate on them over the weeks, so. But if there's any
Definitely.
initial thoughts.
Interested.
Yeah.
Again, makes sense. Those big corridors like 14th, I know we talked about it when we redid 8th Street. We were specifically talking about that being important on, I think it was both sides, because it felt weird that some were going up 2 stories on the south side, and it felt that only some were going up on the north side. Mitch?
Yes, I'm curious what the threshold would have to be to trigger the rebuilding of 2 stories, particularly along the Front Street corridor downtown, where, I mean, a lot of people might think of it as multi-story, but many of those buildings, almost 50% of them, are only 1 story tall. And they do see periodic changes as a building gets sold or a business closes and a new business moves in. And the building might get fully gutted, but the walls aren't torn down. So at what point does it reach a standard that, okay, we're going to require that 2nd story?
And that's, I think, a detail we'd have to figure out, like what the triggering mechanism is at that point. Yep.
Yeah, because along 14th or 8th or US 31, you would more frequently just see either a vacant lot or a parking lot or a building that gets torn down and something is entirely new. But in Front Street, where you have buildings on either side, you're not necessarily going to see that.
Correct, yeah.
So you're talking about, say, for example, McDonald's guts its building, puts up a new facade, or Taco Bell goes into the Kentucky Fried Chicken building. Should those be required based on the amount of work or construction they put in? Aren't there already kind of standards for that in the zoning ordinance now?
That's
About
what I'm
when
asking about,
something
where
could
the
become
standard is.
non-conforming. When does it, when does something become non-conforming?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that we haven't listed here that internally we talk about. Our whole non-conforming section needs work to kind of provide some clarity on that. That's an area that I would say is a deficit right now for administration. It's not very clear on us, and so we have to do our best interpretation at times. And
Garfield Township has a much clearer standard for how much, in terms of square footage or value of the parcel, is being changed, and then it counts as triggering the non-conformant.
When full compliance would then be
Yes.
required with the existing standards, yeah. And so that's, again, I think one of those details that we'll need to work through once we get to that point. That'll probably be one of the latter sections that we cover or get input on, to be frank. So, any other thoughts on that? The next section, I'm not really going to go over, it's just kind of the process from the act for review and adoption. It's not that much different than a zoning amendment, to be frank. So you guys would hold a public hearing, notice would go out, a recommendation to the city commission. They may hold a public hearing. They're not required to, I don't think. And then they would have the final adoption, because only the legislative body obviously can adopt ordinances. So just moving forward, the last thing, this would be a great time as we're working internally to revisit the master plan, flip through it, look at the prescriptions, have some of that fresh in mind as we enter these discussions about what the master plan is calling for in that regard. And we put a link there to where those are all captured. So remember, there's really, when we went through that exercise, 23 and 24, there's really 3 products that came out of there. There's the magazine portion of the master plan, which is the distilled down prescriptions that came out of the public engagement, and the creation of the supplemental report, which is very long. Please keep in mind, half of it is all the verbatim community input that we received. We incorporated it all for transparency, so it's all there. So, about 300 pages of that you don't have to necessarily even look at to be informed, unless you wanted to kind of cross-reference some of the comments that were made. But a lot of the details and high-level considerations are in those chapters of the supplemental report. And then, of course, there's the mobility action plan, which is an appendix to that, which, going back to a point that I think Mitch made earlier, is not just having good biking and walking infrastructure, but having worthwhile destinations within a biking and walking distance to facilitate that type of transportation mode. So those are things to consider there. So I've done a lot of talking about this, so I'm glad to not talk anymore and listen to you guys and move on to the next item if you're at that point.
Yeah. Oh, Jackie, sorry.
If we could just backtrack a moment to the issue of public input. Personally, I've been disappointed in how relatively few people appear for public hearings at our commission meetings. And if there were an opportunity to bake into the process more public input that perhaps didn't require folks to show up at 6 p.m. on a Tuesday evening, but that was more readily accessible, and that could be captured easily and that we could review on a regular basis. I would certainly advocate for that. I think more and earlier would be good watchwords in terms of public input.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to, we have coffee hours. There are other avenues that we have for public input. I'm open to doing some creative things, like on a walking tour app. That's open to the public. So maybe we just pitch that we're doing a walking tour and try to make it exciting or something. But yeah.
Yeah, we can do that. We certainly can explore ways to do that. Of course, all these meetings are public. Public comment is always available at each agenda item. We do have the public hearing. If it's the Planning Commission's will, once a draft is created, we could have an open house event that, like we did for the master plan, where we had it go all day into the evening. So you didn't have to just rely on evening hours. You'd come on your lunch break or something to give some input. I think this process does look a little different than the master plan, because the master plan is where we spent 2 years of public input to get the prescriptions that the zoning ordinance is based off of. So a lot of what the public input on zoning tends to be in these cases is affirmation. Like, does this reflect what you reported wanting in the master plan? And so it's kind of closing the loop then on that whole multi-year process. But let's definitely keep that conversation going about the different ways that people can provide additional input, as well as any creative solutions that you all would like us to try to pursue. Okay.
Okay, so shall we open the public comment portion of the old business for this item?
If you are.
Yeah,
up to it.
okay. Any public comment on old business A, zoning ordinance rewrite work plan? There will be a general public comment at the end again, but this is just for this item. Seeing none, I'll close public comment. You have everything you need from us?
For now, yeah, thank you for obliging us through that long discussion. But
It went longer than I predicted it would, so I'm glad we were thorough.
Don't get me going. I can just keep going and going.
Sean just likes talking about all these rewrites. So new business A is where we're moving on to next. The introduction of a zoning text amendment to officially add municipal markets to the OS Open Space District.
Yeah, so this is a memo written by both the attorney and I. She approached me about bringing forward to the Planning Commission. The question has been raised about the farmer's market. Of course, it's been going there since 1984. This ordinance has been there since 1999. It is a legally non-conforming use. And of course, the argument can be made that the local municipality is not actually subject to its own zoning. However, for housekeeping and to remove any confusion and make it more clear, the city attorney recommended moving forward a potential amendment just to explicitly list municipal markets in the district. It also removes any legally non-conforming status that may apply, and we know that, as we discussed earlier, that can provide a barrier. So at this point, no action is needed, but since that was requested, I wanted to bring it to you and let you know that we will hold that public hearing in your consideration with that notice for the, I believe it's May 6th, 7th meeting? Our next regular meeting in May, so that first Tuesday, May 5th.
5th,
So,
yep.
yep.
Cinco de Mayo.
Who doesn't want to be at a planning?
Yeah, the planning commission meeting
Well,
on
today
Cinco
is
de
National
Mayo.
Beer Day, so.
Oh, okay. 2 months in a row then. Jackie?
Can you fill us in with some more background in terms of this legally non-conforming use? I've received some input questions about, for instance, do we have verification on what the zoning was when the Sarah Hardy market began in 1984, and how does that align with the zoning of Lot B, which was established, I guess, in the Bayview Mall lawsuit, and 2 years later? Can you walk us through, zoning by zoning by zoning, where we stand on this piece of property?
Probably not to the degree that you're asking right now. I just don't have the information ahead of me or in front of me. So the zoning ordinance that was in effect in 1984 was adopted, I believe, in 1956. We had that ordinance through 1999. And once, let's say you create a new zoning district or anything like that, anything that was existing there before that is no longer allowed or wasn't explicitly included or anything like that is allowed to continue. That by virtue makes it legally non-conforming. You can't, it's protected property at that point. You're vested in it and stuff like that. So I don't know offhand what the 1956 zoning ordinance said for that location, but by virtue of it being in existence at the time in 1999 when that district was adopted through the 1999 new zoning ordinance, that created its legally non-conforming status.
Mitch?
Since I'm just a little confused here. Since public use, government property doesn't have to follow our own zoning code, why do we even have, in some places, very specified list of allowed uses rather than a general description of these are government-owned properties that will serve a variety of recreational park-like and public service functions?
I can't answer that.
Yeah, it sounds
I
like
didn't
a
write the
question for you,
99
attorney.
ordinance, so yeah, it's hard for me to say why they established it that way when they did. But yeah, again, this is coming as recommendation as a housekeeping item from the city attorney, just to make it clear and remove any ambiguity to the use.
Jackie?
I have two other concerns. One is, whether a 9,000 square foot permanent structure is indeed a park-like use, I think needs some support. And then also, are there unintended consequences or spillover effects onto other parkland within the city? So
To that is the question, would be allowing municipal markets clearly, only run by the city, in the OS district, cause the city to start running farmers markets in the other parks? Is that the question? Or because it's specifically a municipal market, so a private entity couldn't do it. And I think considering that in the last 40 years, the city has never pursued a second farmers market anywhere, I don't see that as being something that is a risk in any way. I don't know that. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a municipal market, so it'd be up to the city commission, I think, to bless it and approve it.
Do we have a definition for municipal market?
We do. It's in the zoning ordinance.
Mm-hmm. Brian?
Do we have it? We have a definition?
Uh-huh.
There is one.
Okay. I wasn't able to pull it up.
Yep. Do you want me? I can grab it quick for you if you want it for reference.
It wasn't allowed, we allow municipal markets in other zones? I don't remember ever seeing that word.
I've never seen
There
it.
is another district where it specifically spells out municipal markets. I don't know which one it is offhand. I've seen it in there before, but under definitions, let me pull up municipal market. Have it? Scroll through 27 different
found it.
definitions about marijuana first. to get to municipal.
Municipal market means a publicly owned and operated building or space where vendors offer a wide range of products from open stalls.
Well,
And
that's
of
a great-
course, I think it's up to the city to approve any sort of license agreement. So all the private entities that operate out of the city are all subject to the city commission's approval. So whether that's tax, the rowing club, the different amenities out
So the city wants to build an open-air pavilion on a parking lot. Okay? Now, because they're going to use that for a municipal market 2 days a week, then we have to put that in this zoning ordinance to be allowed? Or could they just build a pavilion and do anything they want with it? I mean, it's a open-air pavilion is what the
Yeah.
city wants to construct.
Why don't we just put the word
And it's in a
pavilion?
parking lot right now, and so I don't know why that wouldn't be considered a park use. I mean, a lot of parks have large open-air pavilions.
Yep.
Of quite a bit of space. So I so that's a whole nother question. But it's not really addressing the construction of the pavilion. It's talking about the use. We also use the open space for festivals and events. How come that's not in here?
Yeah.
I was wondering
And I'm
that
sure the
too.
festival, at least one of the festivals probably has been going on longer than
I'm gonna say
the
about
zoning ordinance, but-
100 years. this
Ordinances,
summer.
yeah.
So my
Yeah.
question is, does that have to be in there? And two, the fact that the municipal markets is a temporary basis. So do we regulate those? And if we're gonna do these, should we regulate
Art fairs.
all park
Yeah,
fairs
it's
and
just-
events?
That's what I was going to
I
say.
mean,
Well,
or are
I
these
would say-
considered recreational uses or cultural facilities? I don't know.
Yeah, and so I would think, based on the conversations I've had with the city attorney, that those are all covered as park uses, therefore they're allowed. And she would argue that municipal markets are as well, but, the question was raised by Commissioner Anderson at the Planning Commission meeting when the DDA came and presented the pavilion, and that's when the city attorney said, you know what, let's just remove the ambiguity that the question presents by just explicitly listing it. So I would like you to move forward with the amendment.
Just so you
no.
know, your open space, your matrix does not show theaters as allowed in the open space.
Yes,
point.
this
But it is right here.
Yes.
Theaters, municipality-owned buildings built prior to 2000.
Was that your comment,
Well,
Debbie?
no, but also there's so much, again, definitions are so important. Like, what the heck is a cultural facility? A farmer's market could be a cultural facility. Also, why is it a municipal market? Let's say somebody wanted to bring, which I always thought should be here, a Christmas market. And a vendor came forward and said, I want to hold a Christmas market. I'll rent the space from you, whatever, agreement you work out. But it's not a municipal market. But it's a great benefit to the community, I think, to have a Christmas market. Same with art fairs. So I think there's a lot of ambiguity in here.
I will say I did find where it's mentioned. It's mentioned in C4. And in C4, it says markets, comma, public or municipal.
Now, there
So
you
that must
go.
be the differential, is that in C4 you can do any kind.
Probably allows the
Well, that
use
covers
of the
Old
city
Town
streets for
Art fairs.
Correct.
sidewalks, fairs, and
Yeah.
other events.
Correct. Yeah.
So, okay. I mean, I don't have a problem with putting
Yeah, I
this
don't
in
either.
right now. I mean, it's,
It's
we did it for the theater. The city's gonna, make a decision what it wants to do.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's necessary. I don't know if it's, it seems to me it's there's so many things that go on right there that are not included.
Yeah.
And it says municipal markets because the city owns the land.
Yeah.
They're markets where the city owns the property, and they allow private vendors to come in and.
But does that mean no
run it.
other kind of market can be used there? That's,
As long as the city
It'd have
owns
to be
the city
managed.
does-
Yeah.
Yeah, it has to be, or contracted by the city.
Yeah.
Correct.
Contract
Yep.
management.
Yeah, so you just can't go in and set up without
Well, you'd have to have a
permit and
contract with them.
renting the
Yeah.
space from the
Yeah.
city, but
Yep.
anybody can do it. It can be used as often as the city wants to do it. Some farmers markets in some communities are, 7
Arnold's
days a week in
Amusements,
the
sells a
summer.
lot of stuff in 1 week, but they don't have a contract with the city. They have a contract with the Cherry Festival, and the Cherry Festival has Do you disagree?
And there's separate ordinances out there too that we have in the books for high impact events, low impact
Yeah.
events, right-of-way events, things like that, that all have to go through approval through all the city departments and the city
And you'll
manager.
coordinate all this when we rewrite the ordinance, right?
Those are outside of zoning, so luckily I don't have to touch those.
Well, we
But there
don't
are those
want them to be-
processes
yeah,
and
they have to.
approvals in place, and I think the ordinance is like, if it's a high impact event, then it has to go to the city commission for approval. Low impact, I think, is administratively approved. If it's in a park, it has to first get Parks and Rec Commission
it's got a lot.
approval, then city commission approval. There's different types of right-of-way events where streets are closed, or rather, rolling events and stuff. So there's a whole another set of ordinances that the city commission has adopted that deals more with temporary events.
I mean, eventually, the city commission is going to decide if it's going to allow the construction of this, of this pavilion. And personally, I think it's a better use than what the continuing use of it as a parking lot, which is how it will continue to be used.
And by nature of them having to, or do new construction there, that whole site has to be brought into compliance with the stormwater ordinance, which right
Right.
now the water's going into the river, so they're gonna reduce the amount of pavement and then capture the water on site, which again, that development of the pavilion is the triggering mechanism to bring those things into compliance, so.
And again, this is being requested by the city's attorney, the city commission's attorney, which is essentially a request from the city commission. So I don't find any reason not to include it at this point.
Yeah.
I prefer if
I
it said
just-
pavilion, but
Yeah, I mean, I just don't, again, it's going to be I don't see anything wrong with allowing it, other than the fact that you may want to put on the fact that they're temporary uses.
Temporary municipal markets or something.
Well, yeah, municipal markets are temporary. They're not.
Permanent.
They're not being
Or
run.
maybe that's included in the definition of a temporary
Yes.
nature or a transient nature.
Yeah,
And I
I mean,
think
it's-
by allowing it in the OS, that allows flexibility. We've had to relocate the farmer's market in the past because of construction. We moved it to Rotary Square. There may be opportunities then to move it. And it's very clear that, yes, you can move it to that park temporarily because that park is also zoned OS and therefore it's allowed.
Because the market is a use, it's not the structure.
Exactly. So the
Correct.
pavilion is completely separate from
Correct.
the conversation, because you're right, the city commission could build a pavilion in every single park, and I hope they do, and, so we can have social connection, we can have gatherings and family reunions and graduation parties. I don't think we have a pavilion in a single park in the city right now. In fact, when I worked
Civic
in
center,
Acme,
not a city park.
not a city park, but yeah, in the.
It's a gazebo.
Well, yeah, they
Yeah.
have that little gazebo, but like, I remember talking to Charity
do have to
Republic when
rent
I
it.
worked for Acme, because they would book their end-of-season staff party at Sailor Park, and I asked, like, why do you bring your staff all the way out here? And they're like, there's no pavilions for us to gather in the city, and we have
Other than
32
at the
parks.
civic center.
34.
Yes, besides the Civic Center, but I
Which
don't,
is County Home
maybe
Park.
that can be reserved, I'm not sure.
It
Yeah,
can
it
be,
can
yeah.
be.
It can be,
Yeah.
okay. I know we held some community engagement there when we were doing their master
I mean, a
site.
boathouse is a structure, right? And that's in there as a structure.
Yeah.
So should it say municipal markets / pavilion? I mean, to get the structure in there?
No, because we're talking about a use.
Yeah.
The structure is allowable with
Guess a
with the
boathouse is a
zoning and
use, but
stuff.
it's
You know,
also a
we're really talking about a housekeeping matter of just removing the ambiguity about the use in the park that's already established.
Again, I think we're gonna cover this on Cinco de Mayo, so we can get more into it, and maybe the public will have opinions, so I don't think we have to dive
Okay.
super deep into it tonight.
Maybe we'll have further legal review.
Yeah.
I would really appreciate some more detailed and specific information from the city attorney, and I'd also like to hear about, the municipal market as a park-like use. What support do we have for that opinion? And I'd also like to try to find out about the zoning pre-1984 that would have supported this legally non-conforming status that's being averred. And I want to hear more from the city attorney about guardrails for other city parks. This seems like quite a unique situation that we're dealing with, and to have blowback on the rest of our parks that would be unintended.
So.
The one thing that I
Would be
would
a
say
concern.
is that I don't have any interest in that. I don't need the city attorney to answer those questions for me for a use at the planning level. I think that your city commissioner hat definitely requires those things, but I don't want to have to, like, the city attorney co-wrote this with planning director, and I just don't feel it's necessary. If the rest of this body agrees with Jackie that we want all of those things at our public hearing, I would oblige the rest of this body, but I don't need it. I don't want to make her come in and then also have to do it again at the city commission level when it gets up there. Brian?
So, the non-conforming use legality is a moot point. The city is exempt from its own zoning. It doesn't have to be a non-conforming use. You're asking it because it was raised here in the description. Let's just all assume instead that it's not a legally non-conforming use, that the city planner was wrong, and the city is just basically doing it on its ability to ignore the city zoning code. Hence, we save staff time and our time asking a question that doesn't have any relevance to moving forward. The city does not have to, like many governments, is exempt from city zoning. What's gone on in the past is irrelevant at this point. If we want to ban farmers markets from an open space, then that's a different question, okay? But that's not what we're doing here. So it's a moot point. It has no relevance going forward, and it would be a waste of time. If the city commissioner wants to ask the city attorney, who works for her or the city commission, that is certainly a question that they can have. And if you have concerns about them moving it to other parks or setting up temporary markets in places, that's really, I mean, I understand that question, and that's is that a concern? I mean, we do a lot of events right now at F&M Park, and it's not like people come and say, is this allowed under zoning? I would say you would have to qualify it as a cultural activity, because they're all temporary. They're not long-term constant uses. But if the city commission wanted to open up, I mean, we have a food concession, a restaurant. We don't allow those in open space. They're not allowed, but apparently they are. City commission did it. Should we shut that down? We do allow boat liveries, so I guess those are okay.
Right.
But, you know, I mean, it's just a question of, I just don't, I mean, it's just like you can go into, the city has spent a lot of time, the city commission, debating what it allows to go on in its parks, okay? And this seems to me to be one, even making this amendment is a colossal waste of our time. But making it more difficult right now, I don't think the city commission has ever given short thrift to the events it allows in its public spaces. It has historically, and I'm assuming continues to, spend a lot of time focused on the way it allows events to occur in its public spaces. It has been very responsive when community has concerns or interests. I just think this is really, it's the whole thing. I don't understand why we're doing it, and it's just wasting a lot of people's time. So that's my position on the whole thing.
Jay?
Could we get rid of all of this?
Yes.
And then like, let's say, you know, somebody wants to do an art market in F&M Park, who does that go to?
It would probably go through the application would go through the clerk's office and process it
And
like
clerk
all
policy.
event applications under the event ordinance. And then based on the event, there's qualifications that determine whether it's low impact or high impact. And then from there, it has one of two approval processes. You know, the high impact having a greater degree of subjectivity and review, and eventually city commission approval. I know some of those triggers are like over so many square feet of temporary tent space, selling of anything,
People.
serving of alcohol, I think duration and volume of people are all things that go into it. There are specific parks in that ordinance, not the zoning ordinance, such as the open space, that are limited to, I think, 3 high-impact events a summer, one each month, one being Cherry Fest. I think it was Cherry Fest, Film Fest, and then the option for a third one in August or something. So there are layers of limitations in those parks as to what the events can be. Yeah.
So there are fences for people essentially to use our parks, like private entities to use our parks.
Oh, yeah, definitely, yeah.
So we could get rid of all of this, and the city is already exempt from following all of this. But private entities would still have to go through a very long and arduous process.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a process. I wouldn't say it's necessarily that long and arduous. High impact more
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
'cause
Right.
there are more layers
Okay.
there. So, yeah, I mean, I would, again, not being an attorney, lean on the advice of the attorney, who in this case is like, this just removes the ambiguity.
Yeah.
The question was raised. This makes the answer to the question
Yes.
more clear by just explicitly listing it. If this opens up a conversation for more discussion on that in the future, I think that's definitely something that we can discuss from a zoning point of view. I think we'd be amiss not to include Parks and Rec Commission, because they're the ones that
Yeah.
review a lot of those events within their parks. So this is just general zoning allowance. Again, she said the question was raised, so let's just address it. Can you move this forward?
So I guess my question is, a group, the Friends of Sarah Hardy Farmers Market comes to the city and they say, hey, you guys should do a municipal market. The city says, okay, cool, we'll do that. There's a process for them doing a municipal market.
Yeah, and then sometimes it goes the other way. It's happening right now with Carnegie and the Bijou, right?
Right.
The city says, we have these buildings, tell us, community, what you
Mhm.
want to do in there, but at the end of the day, the city commission is going to be the one to decide ultimately, what can happen in those properties.
So I guess that's just I'm just clarifying that, like, putting this together in the first place was to Brian's point, it was a waste of time to have airport clear zones, athletic
Yeah.
fields, like, somebody had to go through and put this all together. So, like, I'm thinking about all the time wasted prior to me, I guess.
So even though I wasn't around for the lumberyard question or whatever that was earlier, I was around when they did the theater, the
I thought he's been here forever.
okay? And the same question was raised. Well, theaters aren't allowed under the zoning ordinance. And the city said, yes, we can put it in anyways, and they said, yes, but we're going to, so they said, let's amend the zoning ordinance to allow it. And this is why we probably have some of the other things that are in this ordinance.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, community gardens or
Outdoor public swimming pools?
outdoor public, I don't know about
those
that.
ever
It's
existed?
possible, because the splash pad is a swimming pool. I don't remember if we had changed it for them. It may have always been in there.
Yeah.
Okay, parks, playgrounds, recreational facilities, but the theaters and municipally owned buildings built prior to 2013. Basically, the city commission is a position, has always been, not, and I don't know if it's the commission, but the staff or the administration is, it's a bad look for us to go against our own zoning, so let's amend the ordinance. Boom, they put it in, and it comes down through administration,
Yeah.
and it gets passed, and normally I don't spend this much time on it.
I think we're reading way too much into all of
Yeah,
this.
it's just,
Yeah.
I'm just giving a little history on it.
If parks suddenly people wanted to do things in all the parks, it's eventually going to come to the city commission, they're going to decide one way or the other.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we can move on.
Mitch, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, and I'll just tie this back to our previous discussion with the zoning code rewrite and the proposal to condense things. I'll, at this point, propose a condensing of OS with GP, or other public-owned property designation, and just have them be all public land. GP already covers the cemetery, which is administratively and in point of fact, a city park.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
definitely do some exploration into that, where it might get a little dicey, and I'll talk with the city attorney about it, is,
A municipal
There are
market
charter
in the
rules that apply to
cemetery.
designated parkland, so that's a layer in there.
Yeah.
I would be concerned that in the GP district, we do allow things like jails. Would this open up a jail? But of course, it would be the city or county building the jail on
Yeah,
their
it's
own
the
property.
county
So,
building it, which they can build it
I would just
already.
need some time to work through that a little bit, but fair recommendation.
So no action at this time. We'll talk about this again on Cinco de Mayo.
Great.
Okay, yeah. Oh, thank you. Yes, Katie. Okay, public comment on this agenda item, which is again, municipal markets as a use in the open space district. Okay, closing public comment on that item. Moving to, okay, wait. Do we need a 5-minute break?
Yes.
Okay, great. 5-minute break, we'll come back at 8.
If you are a student, we will sign your thing. You've done your time.
Yeah.
You've put in a
Done
lot
your
of listening
time.
today, so bring your thing up here and
time.
we'll take care of it.
Walking tour. Yeah, exactly.
Except, but then I said, except for that walking tour we did, was it last summer where it was like in the heat for Bavarian Buffer, were you on?
Oh my God, it was so hot.
So hot, it was
Yeah.
so,
But I just,
yes, that's right, that's right.
Well, and we also approved the.
Well, I don't know where Sean went to,
for,
so,
Johnson Avenue property.
okay,
Oh, yes.
that
yes,
makes
yes,
sense.
yes.
What was happening in that
I
other
think
room?
people change.
I can do some, you can do some. We were both at the meeting.
Purchasing
That makes
habits
sense.
during
Okay.
different months, right?
City Parks and Rec was looking at
Or
those
you plan it
RFPs.
around other.
Oh, gotcha.
Oh, I gotta
Well,
go to-
That
I'm
tracks.
leaving.
I gotta go to Oriana. So I'm gonna plan that around.
You're fine. Sean's not
I'm gonna
back
plan
yet
a
anyway.
stop at
Okay.
Silver
Okay.
Spruce. Trip to Oriana.
Can I start with Sean, without Sean? No.
Yes, you can.
Okay, we'll
You're the
return,
chair.
we'll return in 1 minute.
And, yeah, and so I was looking for, like, every time I
He
look at
comes
the
in
list
and
of all the
immediately starts
commissions,
talking.
I've already done
Sean,
it.
I
No,
did give the 1
I
minute
just don't know
call,
anything about
just so
any
you
of them,
know.
But I'm like, I bet you'll learn, which is true.
Yeah.
You know?
It's gonna end up being a 2-minute call.
Yes, I am aware of that one, yes. Yeah, we do the absentee counting in that room over there.
Ah, nobody
Yes.
told me that. And then
Yeah, so you're just
finally
like,
somebody was
"Where's
like, hey,
everybody
there's a restroom.
Yeah, back that
there."
way.
No.
Oh,
These are the things you don't learn.
so sorry, yeah.
So, yeah.
The one back here?
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is a lot of information right now, but you know.
I used to walk all the way out and then I,
Doesn't it feel awkward though?
yeah, it does.
Okay,
Yeah,
being on
because people
that
are
side,
looking.
Yeah,
after
you were gonna
sitting
put
here
something
is
together.
like-
I was like, okay.
Meetings are going on, I never,
No.
and those will go until like 2 in the afternoon.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there
they're
is.
so long.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Back bathroom.
Oh, I have a pink pen, I think that's yours.
Leslie's like, oh, no, thank
Like
you.
as soon as he took it, he put it in.
Yeah, probably a long time. Yeah.
I like love, I'll wait till it's done.
Yeah, You're gonna wait for that
I'm
comment
gonna talk
till
about my
the
passion
end of the
for
meeting.
dill
Yeah.
pickles and this whole
yeah,
incident. I don't even know if you were working here.
Okay, so we're gonna return, and we're gonna talk about our last item, which is new business B, introduction of a zoning text amendment to make auto-centric uses, such as car washes, drive-throughs, and service fuel stations, uses requiring a special land use permit as consistent with the recommendation of the master plan. That is incredibly wordy. Sean?
Yeah, so, in February, we had the site plan before the planning commission for the Tommy's Express Car Wash. So just an update on that, we're still waiting for the traffic impact study to be completed. I would hope that by the end of this week, we would have that.
Hope.
What's that?
We would hope.
We would hope, yep. Just based on what the traffic engineer had laid out for timeline. And it was discussed by some of the planning commissioners at that time that frankly, we don't like this use in this location, but it's allowed by right, so if all the standards are met, we have to approve it, and there's not much subjectivity to that. Now, the master plan does call for evaluating the current standards for these auto-centric uses, such as drive-throughs, car washes, gas stations, things like that. So that is supported by the master plan. And then as I shared at the meeting at the beginning of March, I was actually contacted by a realtor who's been paying attention to these conversations and just said, you just want to let you know, you guys have been, I heard you guys talking at the meeting about some of these auto-centric uses. We are getting a tremendous amount of inquiry for such uses within the city limits. So we wanted to bring that as an opportunity. You may not want to wait until the zoning ordinance rewrite is complete to specifically address those issues. The market may move faster than you all and us do through that. So I wanted to bring to your attention the possibility of moving forward an amendment that essentially moves the auto-centric uses, anything with a drive-through, car wash, gas station, to a use that requires a special land use permit. What that does is it allows a greater degree of subjectivity within the review. It also allows or introduces another set of standards, those that are specific to special land use permit uses. And it gives the final decision upon recommendation of the Planning Commission to the City Commission to make that decision. So what you see in your packet there is a kind of restructuring of some of these uses. We went through and first just listed the districts where some of these uses are allowed. Primarily, they're in the C3 district. We already have a precedent that if a use like has a drive-through downtown, such as financial services, that automatically triggers it to a special land use permit. So you can have a bank downtown, but if your bank wants to have a drive-through, that's a different review process because of the impact that that additional land use component may have on the network. As we discussed previously back in March, I mean, I think some of us remember this was more amplified during COVID, but auto-centric uses were highly utilized, right? And we had issues with not enough stacking on some of our properties. And we had cars backed up onto East Front Street where we have the Taco Bell and McDonald's because, people were just staying in their cars and stuff like that, and that was creating some problems. So by being a special land use permit and having that greater degree of subjectivity, it does give you a few more tools in your toolbox to work with the developer to get a development plan that is more appropriate for a given location. So I'll turn it over to Anna for now, and then happy to walk through some of the details in here.
Yeah, I think this pairs really nicely with the conversation we've already had about the rewrite. I think this is something that we should be thinking about. I don't want to wait the entire time for a rewrite. We heard from the public at the car wash, that there's not a lot of bite for it. I'm scared of other ones. I'm scared of drive-throughs. I hear all of this. This makes a lot of sense. The one thing I will say is that it could be a larger commitment for us because we have to review SLUPs. I think as long as this current body is willing to take that on, again, we're doing it so infrequently already. I'm fine with it. I think, again, it just provides a layer of protection that we have, which we can't really do right now. And one other thing I'd say is when I think about auto-centric uses, there's really so few spaces where that could be implemented, but I'm not the most creative thinker, and I'm sure somebody could come up with it, and I don't want to leave that up to chance. So yeah, those were my original thoughts. I thought we should think about it. I thought this was a great idea. I wanted to see if there was any bite to it. Yeah, Mitch?
Yeah, I think that this is a good idea. I'm ready to move forward with this if we have language. I think it's a good first step. Though this will take a reevaluation of where we have drive-throughs, car washes, and other car-centric uses throughout the city, I would be interested in seeing it actually not just requiring the further scrutiny, but paring that down to only C3. And I just have to see clarity for how many grandfathered drive-throughs or car washes or other things that leaves in the city.
Okay.
Can I add
Oh,
2 points?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, 2 points I forgot to add. The first, with the SLUP, and this goes back to the topic of community input, SLUPs require a public hearing at the Planning Commission level and a public hearing at the City Commission level. So again, there's more public input in it through a SLUP process than there is for a by right use. And just on that topic of the market moving faster than municipal government sometimes, again, I do have a meeting tomorrow with someone who's interested in rezoning an HR property to C3 so they can have a drive-through. So again, this is out there, momentum's happening. I think there's plenty of opportunities, and it's indicated in the memo as we move forward to right-size those locations. We could spend 6 months figuring that out now, and you could be in a position to have to approve 6 more car washes while you work through that. So if I'd made a recommendation, I think it might be to focus on the review process now and then continue the conversation for the locations and things like that with the districts. And that's going to fold very nicely into the broader conversation with the zoning ordinance rewrite.
Of the uses, yeah. I was remarking originally about Brian's face, but now he looks very pensive, so I'll go to Jackie while we wait for Brian.
Well,
Man of such few
first,
words.
I'm very supportive
Yeah, he's gathering.
of introducing the SLUP process here, and agree that time is of the essence and faster is better. I had a question about, back on page 41 of this PDF, there was some expansion of administrative SLUP approvals, things like for cluster homes. And I just wanted to understand clearly, is there a bright line between what kind of SLUPs require only administrative approval and which kinds would be still going to the city commission for approval?
Yeah, yep, and that's laid out in the ordinance, so nothing's being proposed to change there right now. You see a lot of red in that section, and that's a
Yeah.
good point, I forgot, because we actually put this packet together back at the beginning of March, but that canceled meeting pushed things to the back burner. So what we did was the SLUP chapter is just kind of confusing how it's structured. So you have one section that lists all the city commission SLUPs. Then the next section lists all the administrative SLUPs. Then the next section lists all the standards for the city commission SLUPs, and then all the standards. So we're like, well, we're listing it twice and getting more detail here. So we're like, well, let's just put the standards up here where we list it. So that's why you see all that red. We just copied and moved those to that other section, but we made no changes to the language in that. So thank you for
Thank
catching
you.
that. I totally
Thank
forgot
you.
that we did that in
I
the
appreciate that
process. That was more of a,
clarification.
since we're cracking it open for an amendment,
Yeah,
that's going to help us administratively just
move through
interpret
it.
the ordinance.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Brian?
So, what we're doing here is basically, SLUPs are expensive. They're time-consuming, there's a huge amount of regulations, and they're about the most subjective thing you can do, and the thing that gets cities sued the most, especially this city. This is basically an action to stop any new drive-throughs, for the time being at least, because it just does not seem like there's much support for any new drive-throughs in the city. So effectively, that's sort of what we're doing. And my question going forward with this, is that, and I'm not sure I'm okay with that, but maybe it would work out. It would depend. I can think of places where they're accessible, or where it might make sense, and we are still a car-centric community, so, and there's just going to be some issues going forward with this. I'm not pro or against, but however, you have restructured our ordinance in this, in the way it's laid out, where you've taken a bunch of it, crossed it out, moved it in the ordinance, and turned all this stuff red. So if it's red, does that mean we get to review the entire ordinance?
Sure.
It's
yeah.
in entirety? Because I have questions about, why do some drive-throughs are required to access only an alley and others are not? Why do personal services with drive-throughs have to go through an alley? Some financial institutions, if you have a repair, and what's a repair facility and what's a service facility? What do they repair and what do they have to surface? Is that actually, does somewhere in our ordinances that define them as vehicle? Because we also refer to vehicular services. So it's really a mishmash when you read through it. There's all sorts of issues. So are we going to address the whole thing? Or are we just basically trying to stick to the...
That's the will of the commission. We didn't have enough input to where we felt comfortable just changing any of those standards. So we took the approach of just restructuring those uses as SLUPs with the existing standards that were already there. But of course, everything is up for consideration at the will of the Planning Commission. So what I would say is we were anticipating scheduling in a month of public hearing, just as part of the required process for any zoning amendment. We can bring this back on the agenda at the next study session to really kind of dive into some of those, since this is being introduced to you for the first time in consideration, if you want to look at some of those specific standards. And again, I think through the zoning ordinance rewrite, this conversation can keep continuing beyond a potential amendment at this time. We brought this forward in response to what we were hearing back in February about, the position the Planning Commission was in with this less than desirable land use at a not ideal location, as expressed, but not really having any other options. So this is being presented as a way to provide a little more flexibility. Yes, it is more subjectivity. I don't love SLUPs in general, to the point that Brian made. They can be challenging to work through, but we really only have so many tools in the toolbox under state law that we can use to kind of address some of these. But, what I would say you're probably not going to be supported doing is just like eliminating the use in general. The state law says you can't effectively eliminate a use from your district or from your community unless, it's demonstrated that that need is being achieved within the region. That's why we can get rid of, not having to allow gravel quarries or designated ag land. The city's a little different than some of these outlying townships. But I would just say, let's not go down that path necessarily. I think you're going to hit resistance from the legal office.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the larger conversation when we get to uses. Like, I could argue that we don't need any more gas stations or service stations in city limits, but would I argue that about banks? I don't know. Brian?
Well, that's, that's our goal right now, is put a hold
Correct.
on these.
Yeah.
That's the goal that's being put forth for us. I understand that. So let me go into some specific questions about the format. So, starting off, we say convention centers, used to say in a D district. Now we just say convention centers. And we used to say correctional institutions allowed in a GP district. Now we just say correctional institutions. You're striking those out. So financial services with drive-throughs and C4 and D districts are not just financial services with drive-throughs. So my question is, when we eliminate that language, do we now allow correctional institutions in every district, or is it already limited to the GP district?
So we noticed that when we were going through and structuring the amendment language with the red lines, that it felt like a redundancy, again, which is what we're trying to get rid of, because the district that it's allowed in is based on each district listing its uses. So it's only going to be allowed in a district where it's used. And the reason we found this is when we were going through this, I think we saw some remnants of R29, like districts we eliminated 5 years ago, right? But because it was in there, so that's why we're just like, well, since it's by virtue defined in each district's chapter, whether or not it's allowed in that district, as best practice, let's not keep repeating that, because that's where we have those errors where you don't catch all the places. And so we felt it was more streamlined and cleaner just to list the district standards in that chapter as is.
Is there anything new you've added into this?
No.
Other than the stuff we're talking about?
Other than switching it from by right to SLUP in each of the chapters, and then condensing the listing of the city commission and SLUPs, and then the city commission SLUP standards, just putting them in the same section. That's really the only changes that we've done. We didn't have enough direction from the planning commission to feel empowered to propose those at this time, but we're open to it. Now would be the time to start those conversations, as well as the next study session, and then the meetings that follow as well. Because again, if a public hearing is going to be held at that first meeting in May, you're not required to make a decision then. You just can't make a decision until after a public hearing. And honestly, you might hear from the public hearing new information that you want to incorporate and consider, and that's totally fine. We just like to get it scheduled because it is a requirement, and we do have timely notification deadlines and stuff like that in advance that we have to hit.
Debbie,
If
then
we're
Mitch.
talking about service stations and fuel shops, can we change that to vehicular service stations and fuel shops? And can we define those as vehicular service stations dispensing fuel and those not dispensing fuel? Because if I'm running a repair shop and by not selling fuel commercially or, or at retail? And then is a service station or a repair shop? I don't even know what a service station is anymore. We used to call them gas stations or service stations, but they don't provide any services anymore other than convenience, food. So it's kind of an issue.
Well, and that's how old some of these definitions
Yeah.
are.
Well, I
because you see
understand
it
that.
listed as service station with or without fuel. Like how many of us
Yeah,
think of
I
a
just
service
looked at that.
station the way you do without fuel? It always had fuel, right? The fact that it sold fuel is why they provided auto service for the people stopping and getting.
Yeah.
I don't think
so-
there's currently a gas station in the city that provides services anymore,
I don't think so either.
No.
Yeah.
or a service station in the
Without
repair
fuel.
shop.
Repair shop that also
Yes.
provides fuel.
So if
Yeah.
you're gonna fix this, it
Well, there
wouldn't
is a
be
gas
that much
station
to
with an
go
integrated
through
car
it.
wash.
And then the question is, it's not really a drive-through if it's just a repair
Shared
shop.
space with-
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
Debbie,
That's what I was going to say. Can we just dedicate the next study session to this?
Mhm.
Have us all go through it beforehand and send our questions in
Mhm.
as we go down, and then you could just go down depending what people said. And then a discussion about, how can you limit something, let's say like a car wash, to a certain area, what that area would be, to Anna's point, that's different than a bank drive-through. I mean, so I just kind of want to talk about that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Yep.
so
And
that-
again, you could get into that position where you're like, maybe there's, and we've seen this in other uses in the zoning ordinance, that maybe there needs to be 1,000-foot separation between gas stations. Or maybe they need to be on corner lots, but, corners are kind of defining intersections. Is a gas station what you want to see, or is a nice building on the corner? So these are some of the things that the planning commission will need to decide. And I think this is a topic that you could probably spend 6 months on, to be
Yeah.
honest. And I think the question before the planning commission is, do you want to spend all that time now, knowing until you put something into effect, the standards that you have in place are in place, and an application comes, we
Yeah.
have to process it under those standards. We were feeling that by creating it as a SLUP, you have that higher degree of evaluation and more subjectivity, which buys you time through the zoning ordinance rewrite to continue that conversation and refining it, and giving you a little bit more protection in the outcomes that you want, that you have expressed in the near term.
So we'd have to vote on that tonight?
Not necessarily,
No.
no.
Okay.
But, that's, as we go through in the coming meetings, the discussions on this, both the study session this month and then the potential public hearing in the beginning of May, we need to be having those conversations.
But we could decide to put it on for a public hearing in May. We could
Okay.
make a decision, and we don't have to.
Well, isn't that what this is? You're already scheduling it for a public hearing?
Well, we would like to be able to.
Correct.
Because
Yeah.
if we wait until the study session, then the public hearing won't happen probably till June, because we'll be
Right.
within the
Mhm. I
15-day
understand that.
publishing.
Yeah,
So
move as fast
we're
as you
just
can.
trying to get direction now.
Yeah.
If we can move forward with the paper, Katie can have them put a placeholder for that Sunday, 15 days beforehand. We try to run them on Sundays. That's when we have the greatest volume of subscribers. But we don't have to do that way. We're just trying to position you guys with as many options as you can to achieve the outcomes you're trying.
I support that.
I do too. I was
Okay.
just gonna say, this is a Band-Aid until we get to the rewrite.
Yeah.
And we can really dive into this, the SLUP, blah, blah, blah. Yes.
Okay,
Let's move.
Mitch, you've been waiting.
Yes, this is a problem. It's both a problem that needs to be addressed now and needs to be addressed for the long term. That long-term solution will take time and work, but it's not. It's something that honestly we should have gotten ahead of months or even a year or two ago. But it is what it is. And essentially legally, we have only a couple options for a short-term thing. One is passing this language here, requiring a SLUP, or we could just put a 6-month moratorium, but that can be a little trickier, and at least this legally preserves the option for a potential developer to go through it, and that would be subject to much greater scrutiny in this period, which frankly those public hearings through the SLUP process could greatly inform our decision and the city commission's decision on what the final language should be.
And I think I would agree, and I think the feedback that we heard from the community in light of the car wash application.
They
is
really
that
wanted
the
more
public
feedback.
Does want more input in this, so this provides them legally those opportunities with notice at two occasions, both the planning commission and city commission.
Jerry?
Oh, yeah, just two quick questions. So, back to the SLUP part. So right now, I'm just thinking of, I don't know what we call it, drive-through row on Munson and Barlow. So if like Taco Bell, all these things have just changed, right? There's Dunkin' coming in. None of those would have to go through a SLUP because would they have to go through a SLUP if we pass this? Because the buildings are staying the same, they're just changing ownership, but does that trigger it? So like, would those have to come through a SLUP? Like if Baskin was like, we're gonna change this Taco Bell to a Baskin's, but it's a drive-through? Or is it?
It's a one-bay drive-through, staying a one-bay drive-through.
Yep, if it operates the same, so to your point, that is what we call a class 3 nonconformity. So it is an existing use that in today's time requires a SLUP, but at the time it got approved, it didn't need a
Right.
SLUP. Might even predate the zoning ordinance altogether in the city. They're allowed to keep operating and continuing. Typically, if they want to do some sort of addition or something like that, or expand the non-conforming use, that's the trigger to come into compliance, and they typically would have to go through the SLUP process at that point. But to operate as is,
They're
completely
fine.
allowed to.
But like the one across from the senior center, that's the vacant lot, which would, it's C2, if they wanted to build a new drive-through and we required a SLUP, then they would have to go through the whole process.
Correct, yep.
I'm just trying to think of how many other drive-throughs. 'Cause I could see where, to Brian's point, that would like, it's just more, we're pretty much saying it's hard to add new drive-throughs.
But it's not a moratorium.
Right, they can
Or a
still do it.
prohibition.
It's just-
Yeah.
But
Or a
existing
prohibition,
drive-throughs
which-
could change hands. That's all I'm just making sure it's not like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and, you know, like, for instance, if the use doesn't change, so if a drive-through restaurant A becomes drive-through restaurant B, that wouldn't trigger compliance.
then
That's
it's-
not changing the use, it's changing the tenant. Yeah.
I have one more question.
Is it personal?
Yes, it is personal. What is a personal services drive-through?
I
I
was,
mean, I could think of like photomats.
Yeah.
So.
Dry
cleaners.
Drive up,
Or,
dry
dry
cleaners,
cleaners.
Yeah.
drop-off
Dry cleaners on
locations. Yep,
I did actually, at the
Pharmacy.
same time Brian brought that up, was also thinking in my mind, in Florida, they have like drive-through liquor shops, they have drive-through dispensaries. Like, do we need to better define drive-throughs? Like, as part of the rewrite, do we need to more narrowly define what a drive-through is or what it can be? Because it does open that door, like, and also, isn't drive-through spelled THRU? Like, and in our municipal code, it is the right proper use of through, but like, everywhere you see it, it's like THRU. So I was confused, should we add that to the definition also? I don't know, I'm thinking about everything, every possible avenue, or drive-through that I could come up with, I'm trying. So, yeah, that's where I leave that. But, so I guess, trying to wrap it up, is there an interest in going through with this process to move toward the public hearing on that first meeting, just to make sure that we're holding space and not letting it get away even further down the, okay.
Yes.
So then we do probably need action to put that, no?
It doesn't require
Oh,
action to set the
perfect.
public hearing, just direction from you, we can do it. But what I'm hearing then, if that is the intent, then we will certainly bring it back at the study session
Yeah.
for
Yes.
further discussion
Yeah.
for it. And I will try not to take up an hour talking about the zoning ordinance.
But I think it would be helpful for people to send their questions in, because it's
I
very long.
agree, yeah.
Yeah.
As early in advance as we can, I think it's helpful to, so that they can have their answers.
So just, and I don't know if this is possible, but you went through here and you added some things. And the things that you've crossed out, no, there's things that are here are new.
Moved,
They're moved.
Okay, they're moved, but there's some new things too. I mean, you've added, you added car wash facilities as a special use permit, and you have requirements for car wash facilities
Those are already existing in the ordinance. I didn't.
those, so we're taking the things that are in they exist somewhere else in the ordinance.
In the
Yes.
uses,
And
probably.
basically in our requirement for drive up or drive through.
Yeah, so if
This
you
wash
look,
facilities.
for instance, in C3, for uses by right, we have them all bulleted. Some of them have sub-bullets with specific standards, and car washes are one of them. So by taking car washes and putting it in the SLUP category in the next section, you'll notice none of those SLUPs have their specific standards listed. They're all in the SLUP chapter, so we just moved it to there in that case. We didn't, nothing in here is a modification or an addition to any of the existing.
Just deletions.
A restruction or a deletion of some of the stuff that was more like the referencing of the districts.
Okay.
But we didn't really want to do any material changes without your input and just bring to you a new structure first to consider and then backfill it with more input.
Was there another part to your question, Brian?
No,
then?
that was it.
Oh,
I just
okay.
wanted to make sure that if there's something new being added, any new language that's not already in the ordinance, I'd like it highlighted in some other way.
Yep.
That was
Yeah.
my question.
And like I said,
But there's nothing new.
we
so.
put this together a month ago. We'll go through and just double check, but that was our intent as we went through it as staff, is not to make those changes now. But we did redline everything that was a change in location, just so you were aware of the fact that it moved.
Okay.
And it
Thank
will
you.
feel weird because it matches the direction of where we're trying to go, where it's not like the rest of our ordinances where it's referencing this and referencing that, and so, or repeating, I should say.
You have this in a Word document?
Oh, yeah.
Can you send it to me in a Word document?
Take note of that. Yep.
Because then I can go review and edit and ask my questions on the side.
Can I ask one favor? Can you change your track changes to a different color so I know what you did and what I did when you send it back to me? I can help you with that a little bit.
If you can set, okay.
And sometimes by default, just opening it on another computer will change the color to
It will,
But
yeah.
that way I can more easily keep track of what it is you want to draw attention to.
Okay, thank you.
Mitch?
For the sake of formality, I move that we accept for introduction the zoning text amendment to require a special land use permit for car washes, drive-throughs, and service fuel stations, and set for a public hearing on May 5th, 2026.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion and a support. I'm going to do public comment first. I'm going to close public comment. Any last comments, concerns, thoughts, ideas? Great. Okay, now we're going to vote on the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Great. Motion passes.
I don't think we
Well, I look forward to having another thorough conversation about that at our study session in 2 weeks. Okay, we've moved on to reports. Update from the City Commission.
Well, yesterday we had a rather long meeting, but suppose a thread that's been going through this for a while. We approved the rezoning of the Munson Avenue properties, so if and when that happens, Third Coast will be able to expand, or other redevelopment will be able to happen on that property. Also, we moved forward with the RFP process for the West End parking deck. That will officially go out in the next few weeks and then have a 6-day period, so that should be coming back to the City Commission by June, but things can take longer depending on how things go. And though we started off this meeting with it, we did approve the appointment of 2 people to the Planning Commission that will fill vacancies that this board has had for a while.
And in addition to that, we did we're looking forward on Monday to a study session with the DDA, conversation about TIF financing. And then I understand, and Sean, you may have more information on timing on this, but there is a joint Planning Commission, City Commission study session to talk about integration of strategic plan and OKRs and Planning Commission priorities, as I understood it. Do you have anything to add to that, timing-wise or
I mean, the
content-wise?
last I heard was waiting until the seats got filled, and then the consultant schedule is playing a big factor. So the last I heard, maybe end of June,
Yeah, I was-
July.
July now.
July.
It's been
I thought I had heard June, so maybe
It
it's been-
was
It
for
been
like
was, but
pushed out.
it
And
keeps
then it got
moving.
moved.
At one point, it was April,
Yeah.
and then it
Yeah.
just, and that's not,
Okay, well, thank you
That's
for the
not our
latest.
control.
Is
it's
that
the
what you sent
consultant
out for us to pick dates?
availability.
Was one of
Yes.
them the July
I mean, I
date?
didn't
Yeah.
send it to you two because I thought that you would have gotten it from the clerk's office. You didn't get anything
Oh.
about a poll? Oh.
Okay.
But I don't know that we got the exact date, did we?
Sarah was
No.
on
You got a
spring
choice
break.
between
We don't
Monday
have
or
the exact date,
Tuesday,
no.
last Monday or the last Tuesday in July.
Correct. Yeah, we don't have
Are you
exact
available
dates
or
yet.
are you not?
Are you available?
I have no idea. It's a lot. Okay?
You already
So
said
that's
you're
the
gonna be
report
gone for a
from the
meeting
city
in
commission
September.
last night.
I thought you just opposed all summer meetings in general.
I do.
I thought that was a hard line.
I know, I do. But
Yeah.
if, you know,
Oh, and
I
as,
said I basically said I'm available right now, but that could change.
as referenced earlier, we are moving forward with the RFP process for the Carnegie Building and the Bijou Building. That will be in 2 weeks, so immediately before or the day before our study session this month. Parks and Rec reviewed the plan for the Carnegie last week at their meeting, and they were just now reviewing the Bijou proposals over in the training room.
Update from the planning department?
Yeah, not a whole lot. We've been continuing to work with People for Public Spaces. As you know, I got that $100,000 grant to do community engagement and some improvements in the area referred to as a social district. They did a site visit this January. They will be coming back in May, and we've been having meetings with them every other week, working on that framework and stuff like that. So those conversations are continuing. We did, by virtue of receiving the grant, there is the International Placemaking Conference that is held in different countries throughout the year. This year, it just so happens to be in Detroit, and by receiving the grant, we got 2 staff registrations and a stipend to go. So we're hoping to bring back to you some neat ideas that we've heard for placemaking at that conference. We do have the national conference coming up at the end of the month. Some people have expressed to Katie that they want to go, and she's working through registration. If that is something you're still interested in, please reach out to her. Megan will get you caught up on some of these conference items and a lot of other things. I'm sure this was a lot to throw at you today. And then just know that that means a number of us will be unavailable on a Friday through Tuesday at the end of April attending that. And office hours are coming up next week, I believe, on the
Tax day.
15th at Common Good Bakery. That is a noon one, so that's a lunch meeting as opposed to the last one, which was in the evening. I don't know that anyone showed up at the last one, but we have had some people sit down at the other ones and have some good conversations. So again, feel free within your own circles to promote that, trying to, again, create more opportunities for dialogue. And I think that is all that we have at this time.
Okay. Joint Planning Commission has not met?
No, but the City Commission last night did approve an amendment that would allow for more sheds. at
Our
the
package
community
amendment.
Garden. Oh, yeah, that's right. You were there. The next meeting is this month, I think, next week even. So we'll be getting that packet out. They're going to be moving towards the rewriting of their master plan. Of course, we're on a different budget cycle than Garfield. They follow the calendar year. Our budget doesn't start to July 1st, so we may not really be starting in earnest until our budget is approved and in effect.
Board of Zoning Appeals?
Has not met.
once again. However, we did have an ad hoc for them today and have two fresh faces.
For appointments.
For appointments to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
I hear there's an application in the works, so we might have a meeting next week.
Oh.
I think there is one for May for a sign at the Civic Center, I heard. And it was kind of funny because we were joking internally today, like there were incumbents being interviewed for the ad hoc who's never even attended a meeting because one's never
Yeah.
occurred in their term.
Yeah.
So it was kind of an interesting scenario.
We have no update from the Riparian Buffer Committee, other than it's in the works. Well, no update since the last meeting we had here, I don't think.
Oh,
We
it
have,
went to design team.
Yep, design team, so there was a collaborative staff review and input was provided and Leslie began incorporating that and she shared at the city commission, the question came up, it's now under legal review
Oh,
with the city
perfect.
attorney's office. The Watershed Center had provided some additional comments that were
After
taken
the
into
committee's
into
last review.
consideration, so those have been there and it's kind of, the timing's dovetailing nicely with some other efforts going on with shoreline stabilization on the public properties, a grant that was approved to apply for last night through Eagle, I believe it was, partnering with the Watershed Center on that, which is also tying into the effort for the Brown Bridge Trust Fund, which one of the top projects, I believe, was shoreline stabilization. So if we get this grant, that frees up some more of that money for projects, and we can use more of this money on, grant money on community engagement and planning and stuff like that. Do some of the more technical analysis.
Awesome. Mitch?
Do we have an update from Leslie about the airport meeting?
No, I have not heard from her. The
Hopefully
airport attorney lives around the corner from me. I had talked to her last week about it, let her know that I couldn't be there. She had invited me, just because we had this meeting at the same time. And, you know, she said, it's a lot about just what the airport is in general. Like, I think they're doing a terminal tour. She said the airport zoning ordinance is only going to be like a small % of what they were talking about there tonight with them. So I'm sure she'll have something to share at the next meeting.
Grand Traverse County, Maxwell is not present, so I don't think we get that unless you have one.
I
from
don't.
them. Okay,
no.
cool. Nothing in receive and file, so moving on to public comment, general public comment. And I'm going to close public comment, seeing none. And, Brian.
Before you adjourn the meeting,
Yes,
we're going to have a study session,
we are.
and can you tell us what's going to be on it in general right now?
Well,
So-
definitely autocentric uses.
Yeah, the
Right.
primary focus is probably going to be those autocentric uses, depending what we have as far as getting a map together to start working on districts. We may bring some of that for discussion. I have been in communication with the chair. There's a possibility there may be a special meeting component if that traffic impact study comes in this week and can be queued up for consideration since the applicant has been waiting for a number of, about 2 months now on it. So, but that is a conversation we'll continue.
Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. The
Did not bomb around.
travel
Yeah, I
schedule.
checked.
2 weeks.